Chapter 925. Sixth Junior Brother. Wang Lin turned to look at Li Yuanfang. Li Yuanfang nodded and handed the quartet of yuan magnetic steel pith to Wang Lin. The appearance of this yuan magnetic steel pith immediately caused the yuan magnetic steel vein that everyone was in to shake violently. The violent magnetic force seemed to have taken on a tangible form, distorting the space where Wang Lin and the others were standing. Wang Lin's expression did not change. He looked at this scene calmly. A large door appeared above his head. The door was half black and half white. The left side was as black as ink. Images flashed, showing the changes of the sea. It was orderly and filled with a feeling that the past could not be recalled. It was ancient and vicissitudes. The right side of the door was as white as jade. The carvings on it changed constantly. It looked messy, but it was filled with countless possibilities. It made people feel endless hope. This was the second technique of Wang Lin's four symbols realm technique, the ancient and present realm. The door to the ancient and present realm suddenly opened, then suddenly closed. Time seemed to flow backward. This mysterious power was added to the yuan magnetic steel pith. The surrounding violent magnetic force immediately calmed down. At the same time, there seemed to be various attractive forces coming from the depths of the vein. They constantly pulled the yuan magnetic steel pith. The pith also shook, as if it had a life of its own. It revealed an emotion of wanting to return to its roots. With the help of this attractive force, Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and the others identified the direction. Using this as a guide, they went deeper into the vein. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao did not reveal their aura. They looked like ordinary people. Under such circumstances, the local Chou Qin naturally would not allow outsiders to enter their territory. They immediately surrounded them. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao did not attack. They did not even bother to look at the Chou Qin, who were at most in the demon commander realm. They walked forward on their own. Li Yuanfang, Luo Qingwu, and a group of junior disciples were in charge of dealing with these attacks on Chou Qin. It was considered as a form of training for them. Yang Qing did not do anything either. She merely observed the situation and supported them. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu were both nonchalant, leaving most of the work to the younger disciples. The group of people fought as they walked. As they walked, Wang Lin took out another item. It was a simple and crude compass. There were no clear markings on the compass, only a needle that kept swaying. This thing was a rare anti-magnetic stone obtained by Xianmen Tianzong when they mined their own magnetic steel vein. After polishing and refining it, it became a treasure. The needle could not point out the direction in the vein, but it could give an early warning from a very long distance. The direction the needle was pointing in meant that there was someone other than the owner of the compass who was repelled by the magnetic force that didn't belong to the vein. The more stable the swaying needle was, the closer the other party was to the owner of the compass. Wang Lin sacrificially refined the compass. At the same time, he also sacrificially refined the magic power aura of Shi Tianhao and the others. In this case, the direction of the compass would not be disturbed. It would only point to the direction of the people who entered the magnetic steel mine other than the people from the celestial sect of Xianmen. Moreover, the wonderful thing about this object was that it would not be misled by the Chouchen beasts. Because the Chouchen beasts lived in this mine, even though they were not truly like fish in water, they would not be repelled by the magnetic force. Therefore, the needle of the compass would not point at them, but at other outsiders. Wang Lin and the others continued forward with the compass and the marrow oars. Suddenly, the needle of the compass, which had been pointing behind them, began to shake violently. It started to spin, unable to point in a fixed direction. Just as Wang Lin was feeling astonished, the compass needle suddenly stopped spinning. Although it was still trembling, its direction gradually stabilized. This time, the needle was pointing in front of them. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao looked at each other. Other outsiders came in before us? No wonder the Cho-Chin beasts here have such low cultivation levels, and there are not many of them. It looks like most of the strong Cho-Chin beasts were attracted by those who came before us. As they advanced deeper into the vein, the scene in front of them suddenly changed. The entire vein seemed to have come alive, shaking non-stop. Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and the others felt as if they had entered the belly of a giant beast. And in the belly of this giant beast, the magnetic force suddenly went berserk. The invisible magnetic force even condensed into terrifying rays of magnetic light, crisscrossing, trying to kill Xianmen Tianzong and the others. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao did not hold back anymore. They used their transcendence energy to resist the chaotic magnetic light. Li Yuanfang looked around. It's a formation. The leader of the Cho-Chin clan in this vein has activated some kind of unique formation, using this magnetic steel vein as a geographical advantage to deal with the outsiders. With that, Li Yuanfang closed his eyes. Purple light flashed around him, turning into mysterious talismans that gathered above his head. These talismans were arranged according to a unique pattern. In an instant, they formed a small but extremely intricate and complicated formation. The formation pattern formed a circle, like a round mirror. The light from the talismans became dazzling, gathering together like a real mirror light. It swept and shone in the magnetic steel vein. This was the second formation divine ability that Li Yuanfang had created from the 8 trigrams scripture of the Great Way of the Heavens, the Insight Treasured Mirror Formation Technique. It was a mysterious and unique divine ability that allowed him to see through other people's spells and divine abilities. With Li Yuanfang's current cultivation, he naturally could not see through all spells and divine abilities. However, it was enough for him to observe the formation in front of him. In fact, there were many formations that Li Yuanfang did not even need to use the Insight Treasured Mirror Formation technique. He could understand the general depth of the formation with just a few glances. For example, the Jade Water Magnetic Ray Array Formation at Cold Wind Mountain. But now, he was using the Insight Treasured Mirror Formation technique. On one hand, the cultivation of the person who set up the formation was higher. On the other hand, it was because the magnetic force could cut off one's divine sense. After a short while, Li Yuanfang opened his eyes. Light flashed in his eyes, as if there were countless talisman diagrams surging together. There are a total of 6,784 formation patterns. The traces of the ancient technique are slightly heavy. Using the Hulua numeration method to calculate 53 formation patterns as a group. The Great Development and 3 talents as one deduction complete. Beginning to supplement. Adding 1,408 formation patterns to the original foundation after supplementing, there are a total of 8,192 formation patterns. Form the 8 trigrams. Open. Li Yuanfang's hands kept changing hand seals. In an instant, countless talisman diagrams flew out from his fingertip. They gathered in midair and condensed into a huge 8 trigrams diagram. After the 8 trigrams diagram was completely formed, Li Yuanfang's right hand lightly tapped its center. This 8 trigrams diagram then fell onto the magnetic steel or marrow in Wang Lin's hand. An 8 trigrams diagram appeared on all 6 sides of the hard or marrow at the same time. It was as if it had been there since birth. Li Yuanfang had comprehended the 8 trigrams Great Way scripture of the 8 trigrams and created his first formation divine ability, the mysterious pivot 8 trigrams immortal formation. Wang Lin nodded. Like Zhu Yi, he also knew his 6th junior brother's methods very well. Although the magnetic steel or vein they were in was still shaking and twisting, with the cooperation of Li Yuanfang's mysterious pivot 8 trigrams immortal formation and the or marrow, the formation that activated the power of the magnetic steel or vein could no longer pose a threat to them. Everyone continued to move forward. Soon, the view in front of them became clear. They had come to a huge mine. A group of people appeared in front of them, fighting against the spinning and twisting magnetic light. Shi Tianhao and the others looked carefully at the other party. They could not help but have a strange expression. Oh, an old acquaintance. The person who appeared in front of them was the great Zhou dynasty's Prince of Yanliang, Liang Fu, who had just gone to Kunlun Mountain to negotiate the ransom. Beside Liang Fu was a Taoist in a white robe. He had white hair and a youthful complexion. He had a sage-like demeanor and was surrounded by faint white clouds. He was the primordial spirit of the great Zhou dynasty, Li Yao, whom Meng Qi had met once when he was exploring the Kunpeng's secret in the Arctic Ice Sea. Along with them were other great Zhou dynasties Yuanying period, Golden Elixir period, and even Foundation Establishment period cultivators. The group was calmly dealing with the situation in front of them. Liang Fu was obviously at ease. With him bearing the majority of the offense, although Li Yao's expression was solemn, he did not feel too much pressure. Especially the group of cultivators under them. Looking at their attire and aura, they were the great Zhou dynasty's famous divine martial army. After these cultivators set up the divine martial immortal extermination formation, the quantitative change immediately caused a qualitative change. Liang Fu and the others' strength was far from the bottom. No wonder they dared to go against the Chou Qin clan's formation that had the geographical advantage. However, after seeing Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and the others, although Liang Fu and Li Yao's expressions did not change, their slightly flickering eyes showed that they were not calm at the moment. Speaking of the root cause, the relationship between Xianmen Tianzong and the great Zhou dynasty had never been too harmonious. Previously, sparks had been flying in the Battle of Yingxi. After that, in the Battle of Xian extermination, although the great Zhou dynasty did not directly attack Yujing Mountain, they had participated in it. After the battle, they were forced to cede territory and pay reparations. This was because Lin Feng's direct disciple, Zhou Yunsong, had been kidnapped by Golden Cicada. Therefore, Lin Feng had rushed to Tianhuang vast land as soon as the dust settled after the Battle of Mount Shu. Otherwise, even if they did not start another war with the great Zhou dynasty, it was inevitable that they would join forces with the great Qin dynasty and other forces to further restrict the great Zhou dynasty. Liang Fu and Li Yao both knew that at this moment Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and the others did not hit them when they were down. It could be said that they were quite moral. Seeing Liang Fu and the other great Zhou dynasty cultivators, although Xianmen Tianzong and the others were a little surprised, they quickly understood that the great Zhou dynasty cultivators were also here for the origin magnetic steel. Origin magnetic steel was a material that the great Zhou dynasty urgently needed. It played a vital role in improving the strength of the divine martial army. Rumor had it that it was even beneficial to the Grand Imperial Palace. However, origin magnetic steel was rare and hard to find, so the great Zhou dynasty had been thinking of all kinds of ways to collect it. Back then, there was an origin magnetic steel mine in Xianmen Tianzong's Xiantian realm, which made the great Zhou dynasty drool. During the Battle of Xian extermination, Xianmen Tianzong had temporarily retreated from the Xiantian realm. At that time, some great Zhou cultivators suggested that even if they did not occupy the Xiantian realm, they should first plunder the origin magnetic steel mine and simply dig up the root. Unfortunately, Lin Feng returned too quickly. In reality, the Battle of Xian extermination lasted for a very short time. As a result, the great Zhou dynasty's mining team had to return dejectedly when they reached the gate of the Xiantian realm. Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and the others naturally did not have a good impression of Liang Fu's group. However, they could not be bothered to waste time on Liang Fu's group. Thus, the people of the Celestial Sect of Wonders treated the large number of people from the great Zhou dynasty as air and directly fell towards the tunnel in the center of the mine that led deeper into the vein. Seeing that Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and the others were not afraid of their formation and headed straight for the marrow, the Chou Qin clan could not sit still and had to personally stop them. Chapter 926. Facing the Chou Qin clan's attack, Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao were only on guard and did not attack. The presence of Liang Fu, riding Cloud Immortal, and the others caused the geomantic compass to be temporarily disrupted. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao both focused their attention on their surroundings, especially their back. Although they did not know that Yuao Dragon King and Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage had entered with them, Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao were on high alert. The Chou-Chen were naturally handled by Yang Qing and the others. There were no Chou-Chen with immortal demon souls here, so Yang Qing and the others had no problem dealing with them. Yang Qing used the minor Yin entering calamity transformation of the four symbols Yin-Yang transformation, using the Yin within Yang to manifest the Yin realm of calamity. She calmly led the way. With a smile on her face, Luo Qingwu automatically fell to the back of the team and was responsible for covering the rear. Her profound Che sword was not affected by the magnetic force in the slightest. The ice sword, which was as black as ink but also glittering and translucent, danced lightly in her palm. It was graceful yet contained a frightening murderous intent. Li Yuanfang walked in the middle, beside Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao, but he did not remain idle either. His hand seals changed as he set up the profound pivot 8 trigrams immortal formation again. This formation was intricately profound, capable of both offense and defense. As the formation changed, it twisted time and space, allowing it to move with Li Yuanfang. Some Chou-Chen charged into the formation and were unable to escape, while others were isolated outside the formation, unable to break in. Xianmen Tianzong and the others were calm as usual, moving at their own pace. Even at a time like this, they did not forget to train their juniors. The Chou-Chen placed in the formation were all demon marshals and demon generals carefully selected by Li Yuanfang. They were specially trained for Han Yang, Tan Yunqing, Huang Zhenting, and Zhuge Wanqiu. Chu Yang followed closely behind Yang Qing, acting as the vanguard. Since he had come in with Xianmen Tianzong and the others, he naturally did not want to be a burden. However, he also did not want to be a guest and steal the spotlight. Although he could not use his sword, he had his own ways to kill Chou-Chen. As he moved forward, Chu Yang was also observing the performance of Xianmen Tianzong and the others. Yang Qingming's behavior was completely out of his expectations. Chu Yang naturally did not know what had happened to Yang Qingming. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu's strength was within his expectations, but the two of them were obviously still at ease, so Chu Yang couldn't judge their exact strength. On the other hand, the performance of Han Yang and the other younger disciples made Chu Yang's eyes light up. He sighed in his heart that Xianmen Tianzong indeed had a successor. As Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and Shi Tianhao, the four heroes of the Celestial Sect, reached the primordial divinity stage, as Yu Hongyan and Yang Qing successively formed their nascent souls, Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu were also close to forming their nascent souls, as Dao Yuding, Zhou Yunsong, Lin Tong, Tang Jun, Ying Luoza, and the others successively formed their gold cores. Han Yang, Goldie, and other outstanding talents emerged one after another, the Celestial Sect of the Celestial. Sect of the Celestial 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 Sect of the Celestial. Based on the rumors that Chu Yang had heard, there were also many outstanding figures among the third generation of Xianmen Tianzong. Talents emerged in large numbers in every generation, and experts emerged in every cultivation realm. The overall structure of Xianmen Tianzong finally began to gradually become reasonable and complete. Today, Xianmen Tianzong was still in a state of rapid growth, and there was still great potential to be tapped. When Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu had also formed their nascent souls, and when Lin Feng's 8 personal disciples had all reached the primordial divinity stage, and when Zhou Yunsong, Tang Jun, Han Yang, and the others had achieved Yuanying, and when the third generation of disciples began to enter the golden elixir period, Xianmen Tianzong could be considered to have truly set foot on its own period of maturity. At that time, Xianmen Tianzong had officially left the initial stage of the sect. Generally speaking, the time taken for a sect to reach maturity from the founding stage of the sect was not uniform, and there was no clear standard. However, it could be said that it was extremely rare for the celestial sect of wonders to reach the scale of the Holy Land in less than 10 years in the Great Thousand World. Even the Great Lane Temple, which was widely recognized as the most brilliant meteor in the history of the Divine Land, and the ancient heavenly gates, which was widely recognized as the most brilliant meteor in the history of the cultivation world, could not achieve such a rapid speed. If one really had to say, perhaps only the Taishu Taoist of the past could establish the Taishu Temple a little faster. However, long before the Taishu Taoist established the Taishu Temple, in the archaic era, the disciples under him had already formed a system that was passed down from generation to generation. It was only during the ancient era that the sect was officially established on the White Cloud Mountain. The rise of Xianmen Tianzong could be said to be legendary in the history of the entire Tianyuan world. From what Chu Yang could see, Han Yang, Tan Yunqing, and the other disciples of the younger generation were also extremely outstanding. Faced with the demon commander and demon general that Li Yuanfang had deliberately let in, the four of them did not panic and went up to meet them. As he grew older, Huang Zhenting's temperament had matured a lot compared to when he was young. However, he was still the most excited of the four. He took the lead and charged at the very front. Faced with the two demon generals that pounced at him, he did not even look at them and directly sent them flying with 2 kicks. He stared at one of the demon commanders and took the initiative to meet it. As he took a step forward, his body surged with layers of lightning. The densely packed lightning snakes constantly pulsed and enveloped his entire body. As Huang Zhenting walked, the sound of his footsteps became louder and louder. In the end, it was like the rumbling of thunder, shocking one's soul. His originally tall body was now completely enveloped by the greenish-purple lightning. He looked like a giant that was 2 or 3 meters tall, and was not much smaller than the demon commander Chou Chen's body. Huang Zhenting had used a secret technique of Xianmen Tianzong's Heaven Desolate Valley lineage, the body of Thunder Caddy. This technique was created by Shi Tianhao after he created his own Barren Sky Valley's scripture of wind and thunder. It was a powerful technique that was derived from the scripture of wind and thunder. It was not only a technique to train one's body, it was also a powerful battle technique. There was also a corresponding technique called the Divine Wind Body of the 9 Heavens. The body of Thunder Caddy possessed the ferocious power of thunder and lightning, while the Divine Wind Body of the 9 Heavens possessed the speed and sharpness of the heavenly wind. After the successors of Heaven Desolate Valley had established their own Tao technique foundation, they could choose which technique they wanted to cultivate. Just like Wang Lin's Extreme Yellow Springs Finger could be considered a simplified version of Wang Lin's Yellow Springs Finger of Annihilation, the body of Thunder Caddy and the Divine Wind Body of the 9 Heavens were also simplified versions of Shi Tianhao's movement of heaven and thunder. Although individually, they were not as good as Shi Tianhao's movement of heaven and thunder, they were still excellent techniques and were less difficult to cultivate than the movement of heaven and thunder. If a disciple cultivated both the body of Thunder Caddy and the Divine Wind Body of the 9 Heavens, they would be able to cultivate Shi Tianhao's movement of heaven and thunder. Goldie was the strongest cultivator of Heaven Desolate Valley. He had mastered the body of Thunder Caddy and the Divine Wind Body of the 9 Heavens, but he was still lacking in maturity. Once he mastered the Divine Wind Body of the 9 Heavens, he would be able to directly break through to the Golden Elixir realm. After successfully forming his core, he would be able to cultivate the movement of heaven and thunder. Looking at Chou Chen in front of him, Huang Zhenting laughed and directly collided with him, not taking a single step back. The magnetic energy in this place was rich and would affect others, including Goldie's own spiritual sense. However, when he used the body of Thundercatty to fight, the magnetic energy would actually increase his strength, just like with Cho Chen's clan. Huang Zhenting was already well aware of this back when he was in his own magnetic steel mine and had specially practiced it. Thus, Cho Chen would not be able to gain the upper hand if he fought with him. However, Cho Chen's clan clearly had no intention of fighting Goldie alone. Very soon, other Cho Chens surrounded him, including many Cho Chens who were demon commanders. Tan Yunqing said in a low voice, "Let's work together against the enemy. The faster we finish them, the better." As he spoke, his hand seals changed, already beginning to prepare a formation. Han Yang smiled nonchalantly and went up to support Huang Zhenting. He could not use his sword artifact, but he had inherited the way of the sword from Luo Qingwu's light dance pavilion. Although he could cultivate his natal sword artifact, it did not mean that he was completely focused on the sword. He held his index and middle fingers together like a sword and pointed at Cho Chen, who was pouncing at Goldie from the side. Immediately, a black sword chi shot out. Even the demon commander Cho Chen was extremely wary of the desolate sword intent. He did not dare to come into contact with it and hurriedly dodged. Han Yang stabbed another Cho Chen demon general to death. Then, he attacked a third time and forced another Cho Chen demon commander to retreat. This was a remarkable ability of the way of the sword derived from Luo Qingwu's mysterious sword cannon after she established her light dance pavilion's mysterious sword cannon. It was called the 7 Swords of the Big Dipper, and there was also the 6 Swords of the Southern Dipper. The 7 Swords of the Big Dipper represented death, and all 7 sword techniques were extremely ruthless. They were swords of destruction and were extremely powerful. However, this path of the way of the sword also consumed a lot of energy. In particular, Han Yang currently did not have a sword in his hand and was relying entirely on his own energy to activate the sword chi, so the consumption was even greater. However, Han Yang's fighting style was extremely nimble. He was rather talented in the way of movement, so he used the second of Xianmen Tianzong's 8 techniques of heaven and earth to the extreme. Even the demon commander Cho Chen found it very difficult to catch him. Some of the attacks that had to be taken head-on were all blocked by Goldie. If the Cho Chen wanted to gather their forces to attack Goldie, they would be threatened by Han Yang, who was fighting on the periphery. With every strike of his 7 swords of the Big Dipper, a demon general or a demon commander would be killed. Although the two of them came from different cave abodes and did not work together much before, they were very well coordinated at this moment. One was good and the other strange. For a moment, the many Cho Chen could not do anything to them, and instead, they suffered losses. One of the Cho Chen demon commanders roared angrily at the sky, and the third vertical eye between its brows suddenly lit up. A spiral-shaped bright white light shot out. This was the Cho Chen clan's strongest offensive ability, the magnetic treasure light. This treasure light was extremely powerful. Even if Goldie used the thunder crash body, if he was hit, a hole would be opened in his well-tempered body. Once Goldie dodged, the line of defense would be shaken, and even Han Yang would be in danger. At this moment, a small chaotic hole suddenly appeared in front of Huang Zhenting. The small chaotic hole was also filled with rolling lightning. However, the lightning looked a little strange, and it gave off a quiet feeling. The most violent lightning in the world gave off an abnormal feeling of tranquility. It was like the flow of water, and the toughness of the world suddenly turned into the softest. When the Cho Chen demon commander's magnetic treasure light landed in the chaotic hole of lightning, it was dissolved by the water-like lightning and could not continue to cause trouble. This was another ability derived from the scripture of wind and thunder of the desolate sky valley lineage, the thunder pool technique. It was a purely defensive technique, but its defensive power was very satisfying, making it difficult for the enemy's attacks to cross the thunder pool. Not far behind Huang Zhenting, Zhuge Wanqiu formed hand seals and repeatedly used the thunder pool technique to help him block the magnetic treasure light of the other Chou Qin demon commanders. The two sides fought back and forth for several rounds, but in reality, it was only a short period of time. When Han Yang suddenly attacked and severely injured Demon Marshal Chou Qin, Tan Yunqing said in a low voice, "8 Gates Star-Fixing Array, open!" Chapter 927. Han Yang, Huang Zhenting, and Zhuge Wanqiu held them back at the front, while Tan Yunqing activated the 8 Gates Star-Fixing Formation derived from Li Yuanfang's He Luoju lineage's Dao technique. The 8 Gates Mysterious Pivot Formula. Treasure light lit up, and a huge 8 trigrams diagram floated in the air around the group of Chou Qin. As the light flickered, all the Chou Qin demons were suppressed by a mysterious power. The demon general Chou Qin was directly immobilized on the spot. Although he was conscious, not a single hair on his body trembled, as if he was a clay puppet or a wooden statue. The demon commander Chou Qin could still move, but his movements had clearly become sluggish. His reaction speed and movement speed had all slowed down. Han Yang snickered. With another Big Dipper sword chi, he killed the demon commander Chou Qin that he had just heavily injured. Chou Qin roared angrily, feeling extremely stifled. However, he could only watch as the Foundation establishment Han Yang pierced his head with a sword. Tan Yunqing's hands did not stop. After the 8 Gates Star-Fixing Formation, she immediately began to prepare another He Luoju lineage's formation, the Absolute Breath-Killing Formation. This time, she did not just use her magic power to set up the formation. She also threw out 8 small flags that were positioned in the 8 trigrams. Unlike the 8 Gates Star-Fixing Array that was used to trap and lock the enemy, the Absolute Breath-Killing Array, as its name suggested, was a powerful array that specialized in killing. The power of the array would erupt in an instant, and its lethality was extremely high. At the same time, the formation that Tan Yunqing had previously set up would also be detonated, increasing its power. In Tan Yunqing's plan, the main attack and restraint could be alternated at any time to obtain the best results and the most secure victory. After she set up the 8 Gates Star-Fixing Formation, as long as Han Yang switched to the 6 Southern Dipper swords and matched it with Zhuge Wanqiu's Lightning Pool technique and the world-dominating technique of the 8 Laws of Heaven and Earth, he would be able to completely trap the Chou Qin without the time to pay attention to anything else. Next, Tan Yunqing laid down the Absolute Breath-Killing Formation. On the other side, Huang Zhenting prepared a powerful divine ability that belonged solely to him, the 9 continents of wind and thunder. With the two of them working together, Chou Qin, who was previously restrained by Han Yang, Zhuge Wanqiu, and the 8 Gates Star-Fixing Formation, could only wait for death. Although it was time-consuming and laborious to set up, and there were many restrictions, the power of the formation was among the best of the same level of magical abilities and spells most of the time. As for Huang Zhenting's 9 continents of wind and thunder, according to Tan Yunqing's knowledge, it was a divine ability that Huang Zhenting had comprehended after cultivating the sect's direct line of inheritance, the 8 trigram scripture of the Great Way of the Heavens. Its power was naturally something to look forward to. The Absolute Aura-Killing Formation and the 9 states of wind and lightning technique were enough to wipe out both Demon Commander Chou Qin and Demon General Chou Qin. Tan Yunqing quickly calculated in her mind, and she quickly rehearsed everything in her mind. She also communicated with the other 3 people. "That's too slow." Who knew that when Han Yang heard this, he chuckled. He did not stop and continued to attack the other demon Marshal Chou Qin with the Big Dipper sword chi. Seeing this, Tan Yunqing's brows immediately furrowed. Han Yang. Han Yang did not reply, and he was already engaged in battle with that demon Marshal Chou Qin. Almost at the same time, Huang Zhenting also let out a long howl and switched from defense to offense. He took a big step forward, and his ghost-like body of lightning erupted with astonishing power and speed. He pounced in front of Demon Marshal Cho Chen, who was frantically dodging Han Yang's sword chi. Huang Zhenting punched him in the head with both fists. Demon Marshal Cho Chen let out an earth-shattering scream. Blood flowed from his mouth, nose, ears, and 3 of his eyes. He pounced toward Huang Zhenting in a frenzy. The third vertical eye between his brows flashed, and a vital magnetic beam shot toward Huang Zhenting. Zhuge Wanqiu agreed with Tan Yunqing's plan, but when she saw Han Yang and Huang Zhenting rush out together, she sighed inwardly. She, who was extremely familiar with Goldie, had already raised a jade ruler the moment it charged out. It was an Aurus Core magical item, and it transformed into a resplendent stream of light that flew over. She met Demon Marshal Cho Chen's essence-fused treasured light with an attack, and it happened to shatter Demon Marshal Cho Chen's magnetic light. After blocking this attack for Goldie, Zhuge Wanqiu's flying thunder ruler did not stop, and it even killed the already heavily injured Demon Marshal Cho Chen. However, at this moment, the remaining 2 demon marshals roared angrily and pounced toward Han Yang and Huang Zhenting. They wanted to take this opportunity to kill them. That's exactly what I want. Han Yang still had a nonchalant smile on his face, but a cold light flickered in his eyes. His left hand formed a strange sword seal, and his right hand moved up and down. His index and middle fingers formed a sword, and he shouted in a low voice, "Go!" As he shouted, a red light flashed on Han Yang's fingertip. Then, dozens of black sword chi mixed with red light rushed out of his fingertips, forming an inescapable net. The 2 demon marshals that were attacking them had basically walked right into the net. They could only watch helplessly as they crashed into the sword chi net. After all, they had already formed their Yao cores, and their strength was extraordinary. They wanted to control their bodies and retreat, but they discovered that the black sword chi net had already surrounded them, and they were being strangled in the middle. The 2 Cho Chen roared angrily, magnetic light flashing around their bodies. However, the violent red light of the black sword chi net cut the magnetic light into pieces. As the head disciple of the Light Dance Pavilion, Han Yang cultivated the supreme path of Xianmen Tianzong's direct lineage, the first chapter of the heavenly virtue scripture of the 8 trigrams of the Great Tao. He had comprehended his own mystique, the sword of annihilation, the sword of annihilation. Seeing that they were about to be torn apart, the 2 Cho Chen demon marshals roared angrily. The third eye at the center of their brows continuously emitted rays of magnetic light. They wanted to take Han Yang and Huang Zhenting down with them. Huang Zhenting chuckled. His body lit up, and a set of black armor appeared. It was also a golden elixir period arcane artifact called the Curse Refining Profound Armor. It could strengthen Huang Zhenting's blood energy, and it could also be used defensively. Summoning the Curse Refining Profound Armor and focusing on defense, Huang Zhenting forcefully withstood the dying counterattacks of the 2 Cho Chen demon marshals for Han Yang and himself. On the other hand, Han Yang's calculations were extremely precise. He only needed Goldie to delay him for a moment, and his Sword of Heaven's annihilation would have already killed the 2 demon commanders. The 2 demon commanders' desperate counterattacks were all bark and no bite, unable to cause much of a stir. This sword was executed by the Foundation establishment Han Yang. Even Chu Yang was slightly stunned by it. His heart skipped a beat. This sword Dao is even sharper and fiercer than Xianmen Tianzong's own Big Dipper 7 swords. This is a sword intent that has advanced the sword of annihilation. It is even purer and more condensed. Although it is still immature and has the potential to improve, it is already above Mount Shu's Li Feng's in terms of concept. Chu Yang took a light breath. This sword seems to have been born from Senior Lin's Heaven Annihilation Sword Qi. After the Battle of Jade Capital Mountain, after Lin Feng had returned, he had communicated with the Celestial Hall with his spiritual consciousness. He knew that there were many members of his family in the Celestial Hall constructed from spiritual consciousness and spiritual power. Therefore, Lin Feng had decisively broadcasted the entire process of him killing Jie Luoshi, Su Anda, and the others, as well as the Battle of Mount Shu afterwards. This had calmed the hearts of the people who had panicked from the retreat of their defenses. At the same time, it had boosted the sect's morale. Chu Yang and the people of Heavens Beyond Mountain had witnessed the entire process. Chu Yang had a deep impression of Lin Feng's Heaven Annihilation Sword Qi. Now that he looked at Han Yang's Sword of Annihilation again, he could vaguely see some clues. In fact, Han Yang's Sword Dao had incorporated some of the essence of Lin Feng's Heaven Annihilation Sword Qi while comprehending his own 8 trigrams of the Great Way of Heaven. Lin Feng's Dharmakaya, which he had entrusted to Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu, had also witnessed the sword just now. He smiled in his heart and said, "I've already touched the threshold, but I still need to polish it." Luo Qingwu had not inherited Lin Feng's Heaven Annihilation Sword Qi, but that did not mean that she had no understanding of it. She had guided Han Yang in his daily cultivation, and Han Yang had gradually figured out some of the ways to it. Finally, he had created his own Sword of Annihilation. As his cultivation continued to increase in the future, his understanding of the Heaven Annihilation Sword Qi would become deeper and deeper. Han Yang had a high chance of comprehending the Heaven Annihilation Sword Qi in its entirety. At the same time, his Sword of Annihilation might also be able to take a new path and achieve a new vision. Whether it was Lin Feng or Luo Qingwu, they were both happy to see their disciples forge their own paths. Lin Feng had high hopes for this kid. After all, he was a good seedling with a total of 32 points in all 4 attributes of innate potential. More importantly, out of all 4 of this kid's innate potential, one of them was full value. Bone endowment, 7 points comprehension, 10 points willpower, 8 points luck, 7 points. Lin Feng shook his head and laughed. Otherwise, why would I say that I reaped great rewards during my 3rd opening of the mountain gate? Of course, geniuses always had many problems. Putting aside the first-generation disciples like Xiao Yan, as the only one among the second-generation disciples who had a full value in one attribute, Han Yang was also a problem child, just like Zhou Yunsong, who had a total value of 32 points. It might be biased to say that he was a problem child, but at the very least, he was a rather controversial person. Within the sect, there were many people who did not get along with him. For example, Tan Yunqing, who was very close to him at this moment, was staring at him with a frown. Tan Yunqing's personality was calm and self-disciplined, but it was also accompanied by a competitive stubbornness. She was extremely strict with others and herself, and was meticulous in her actions. At the same time, her actions were swift and decisive, and she left no leeway, nor did she give others any face. At this moment, she was staring at Han Yang with an unfriendly expression. "Han Yang, do you know that what you did just now put you and senior brother Huang in a dangerous situation?" Han Yang raised his eyebrows slightly. He nonchalantly killed the demonic generals who were still trapped in the 8 Gates star positioning formation and casually replied, "Dangerous situation? I don't think so. Everything depends on the result. Aren't senior brother Huang and I both fine now?" Tan Yunqing said coldly, "If we followed the original plan, we could have been more secure and killed these Chou Qin beasts without the slightest mistake. If you think that my plan is bad and you don't want to cooperate, that's fine. If your plan is more outstanding than mine, then we will cooperate with you. But the facts have proven that you are completely playing with fire." Han Yang smiled. "I admit that I didn't follow your plan because I felt that it was too unsatisfying and too slow." When he used the annihilating heavenly net to kill the 2 Chou Qin demon commanders, Tan Yunqing still needed a considerable amount of time to finish setting up the absolute aura-killing formation. Of course, this period of time was actually not very long for ordinary people, and it would arrive in the blink of an eye. However, to Han Yang and the others, they had probably not even finished setting up the formation yet. Since we can finish it faster, why waste so much time? Han Yang smiled. Moreover, using the absolute aura-killing formation will consume a lot of your 8 formation flags, so why waste them like this? It's completely unnecessary. As for the danger, a light flickered in Han Yang's eyes and he calmly said, since I dared to do it, I naturally have the confidence. What danger do you mean? Chapter 928. Han Yang looked at Tan Yunqing and said with a smile, the outcome after the event is the only way to test the success of the plan. You said that I was playing with fire, but in my opinion, it is the opposite. The reality proves that I succeeded. Tan Yunqing stared at him and slowly shook her head. You won the gamble, but it doesn't mean that your gamble was correct. If I have to take the risk, then I'm not a stubborn person or a coward. But there is clearly a safer method, so why take the risk? You won the gamble this time, but it doesn't mean that you will win every time, and it doesn't mean that you will always win. If you fail even once, the consequences may be severe. Tan Yunqing walked in front of Han Yang and looked at him coldly. Don't tell me nonsense like you will bear all the consequences. There are many things where the consequences are so severe that you can't bear them just because you say so. Just like this time, if you fail, not only will you be in danger, but you will also implicate senior brother Huang. People of different paths cannot make plans together. If you insist on doing things your own way, I have no intention of forcefully interfering, but if you implicate others, you cannot simply do as you please. The elders of the sect have been warning us about this since the first day we entered the sect. If you are so self-centered, not only will you harm yourself, but you will also harm other fellow sect members. Han Yang laughed and turned to look at Tan Yunqing. On the contrary, Tan Yunqing, you can't see the crux of the matter. He smiled. It is precisely because my companions are you that I believe you can keep up with me. That is why I did what I did. Because I clearly know your strength, I am confident that my method will succeed. If it were some other weaker fellow sect members, I naturally wouldn't do this. If it were Tang Jun, senior brother Zhou, or senior brother Liu, I would have another plan. Tan Yunqing said coldly, you are too conceited, Han Yang. You clearly have a 90% chance of success, but you insist on challenging a method that has a 70, 60, or even 50% chance of success. You must know that luck will not always be with you. Han Yang raised his eyebrows, and his gaze suddenly became sharp, piercing Tan Yunqing's eyes to the point that they hurt slightly. Tan Yunqing, you still don't understand, he said calmly. I don't deny that my luck is not bad, but in reality, everything depends on luck. It's just more or less. Just as you said, my luck won't always be this good, so... Han Yang smiled coldly. If I relied solely on luck, I would have died long ago. Tan Yunqing's eyes narrowed slightly as she stared at Han Yang. Han Yang nodded. Do you understand now? In your opinion, there's only a 50 or 60% chance of success, but in my opinion, there's an 80, 90, or even 100% chance. He chuckled. So, I'll say it again. Since I dared to do this, I'm confident. It's just that in your eyes, it's very dangerous. But in my eyes, it's not like I'm walking on flat ground, but it's just a small risk. The two young men stood face to face, looking straight into each other's eyes. Han Yang smiled, but this smile was completely different from his usual mischievous smile. Instead, it revealed the untamed sharpness hidden deep in his heart. This is the gap between you and me, and also the reason why you can't defeat me. Hearing this, Tan Yunqing's pupils contracted slightly. The average quality of the younger disciples who entered Xianmen Tianzong's third opening ceremony was extremely high. Among them, Tang Jun, Han Yang, and Tan Yunqing were the most outstanding. Among them, Tang Jun's cultivation was at the early stage of the foundation-building realm the moment he entered the sect. His starting point was much higher than that of Han Yang and Tan Yunqing, so he was always in the lead. He had already successfully formed his gold core, and his cultivation speed was even faster than Huang Zhenting, Zhuge Wanqiu, and the others who had entered the sect before him. As for the remaining two, whether it was in terms of cultivation speed or in actual combat, Han Yang always won over Tan Yunqing. To Tan Yunqing, who was always strict and calm, he wouldn't be jealous of Han Yang because of this, nor would he deliberately target him. The conflict between him and Han Yang was purely due to the difference in their personalities and ideals. It was also because he didn't see eye to eye with Han Yang that Tan Yunqing was even more strict with himself and trained even harder, hoping to surpass Han Yang. On the other side of his strict and calm side, Tan Yunqing was also a stubborn and strong-willed person. Unfortunately, whether it was an official competition within the sect or a private exchange between the two of them, the winner was always Han Yang. Tan Yunqing looked at Han Yang. Han Yang, you're too conceited and too self-centered. Conceit makes you unable to see yourself clearly, and self-centered makes you unable to see others clearly. Han Yang smiled faintly. So it's you, Tan Yunqing, who can't see yourself clearly and can't see others clearly. You said that you're not a stubborn, cowardly person, and that you're able to make up your mind when you need to take a risky move. I believe these words. But Tan Yunqing, before that, your thoughts and actions toward others and yourself were always to seek perfection, and to pursue everything within your control. Only when you have no other choice would you try to fight for it. However, the affairs of the world change rapidly. How can everything go as you wish? In the process of your relentless pursuit of absolute certainty and stability, many opportunities that you should have been able to grasp, opportunities that you originally had an 80 or 90% chance of succeeding, would be wasted by you. When you're certain that you don't have absolute certainty and need to fight for it, you'll often discover that you only have a 70, 60, or even 50% chance of succeeding, or even an even lower chance of succeeding. At that time, you really can only fight for it, and you can only hope that your luck is good. Han Yang chuckled softly. It doesn't matter if others are paving the way for you, or if you're paving the way yourself. You're always used to walking on a path that's already been paved. When you encounter a natural chasm that you can't pave, and you need to leap over it, or when time is so tight that you don't have time to pave the way, what will you do? Tan Yunqing glanced at him from the corner of her eye and coldly humphed. Ice and charcoal don't work together. The arrogant expression on Han Yang's face disappeared, and a playful smile reappeared on his face. I wasn't the one who started the conversation in the first place. Slowly, Tan Yunqing shook her head. Sooner or later, you'll end up playing with fire, Han Yang. Han Yang smiled. Perhaps. Looking at his nonchalant expression, Tan Yunqing shook her head and didn't say anything else. This wasn't the first time she'd seen Han Yang act like this. The three biggest thorns among the second-generation true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong were Eloza, Han Yang, and Huang Zhenting. They were the three people who broke the rules of the sect the most. Although Zhou Yunsong wasn't good at getting along with others, he didn't interact with others most of the time, so he didn't have many opportunities to break the sect's rules. However, unlike Eloza and Huang Zhenting, who were often punished, Han Yang was punished much less. This definitely wasn't because he made fewer mistakes, but because this arrogant and slippery brat was better at exploiting the loopholes in the sect's rules. This guy's familiarity with the sect's rules was actually no less than Tan Yunqing's, who was strict with others. If it weren't for the fact that the person in charge of the law enforcing hall was Li Yuanfang, who was more familiar with the sect's rules, Han Yang would have been able to escape punishment every time he broke the sect's rules. It was also because of his existence that the loopholes in the sect's rules were basically closed, causing Han Yang to often laugh at himself. When he offended Li Yuanfang and couldn't avoid it, he behaved like this. His standard attitude was good, but it was hard to say what he was thinking in his heart. When Lin Feng's divine power doppelganger saw this scene, he couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. Sure enough, the same rice breeds different people. The sect was also a small society. Everyone grew up in different environments, had different personalities, and naturally had different views on many things. It was very normal for there to be differences between people. It was completely unrealistic to expect everyone to love each other, unless they were all brainwashed. Therefore, Lin Feng didn't care too much about the internal conflicts between the sect's disciples because of their different personalities and ideals. He only needed to ensure that they were reasonable and restrained, and that they didn't affect the overall unity and prosperity of the sect. Whether it was Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, Li Yuanfang, or Luo Qingwu, this was how they taught their disciples. They only guided their disciples to walk on the right path and not deviate. They wouldn't think that all disciples were carved from the same mold. For example, in the dispute between Han Yang and Tan Yunqing, both sides automatically used transcendence energy to transmit their voices. This ensured that Chou Chen and the people of the great Zhou dynasty in the distance wouldn't laugh at them. Even Chu Yang, who was nearby, was fooled. Other than Xianmen Tianzong's own people, no one would know that there was actually so much inside information in their battle with Chou Chen. They would only think that Han Yang, Tan Yunqing, and the others had always had the same plan. Although Han Yang and Tan Yunqing didn't see eye to eye with each other, when Han Yang insisted on attacking Chou Chen according to his own method, Tan Yunqing didn't immediately give up. Instead, she strengthened the Eight Gates star-fixing formation and slowed down the movements of the two Chou Chen Yao commanders. Similarly, Han Yang's plan was to use himself as bait. He wouldn't purposely let Chou Chen attack Tan Yunqing so that he could come and take advantage of the situation. According to Lin Feng's knowledge, Han Yang had once saved Tan Yunqing in a dangerous situation when he went out to train. Of course, even so, this didn't stop the two from continuing to see eye to eye with each other. Tan Yunqing would remember Han Yang's assistance, but she also disliked Han Yang's way of doing things. Conversely, Han Yang was the same. But as long as it was controlled within the bounds of healthy competition, Lin Feng, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qingwu wouldn't interfere too much. In reality, because of Han Yang's existence, Tan Yunqing, who had always strived to do her best in everything, was able to further excavate her potential and shine even more brightly than expected. This was naturally something that Lin Feng and the others were happy to see. Li Yuanfang also disliked Han Yang's way of doing things, but he, who was even calmer than Tan Yunqing, would never deliberately target Han Yang. And when Han Yang broke the rules of the sect, he naturally wouldn't be lenient. Although the unruly Han Yang hated the restrictions of all kinds of rules and regulations, he still trusted Li Yuanfang's decisions because Li Yuanfang was extremely fair. However, the disciples of He Luoju naturally inherited Li Yuanfang's characteristics in their way of thinking, so they didn't really get along with Han Yang. Tan Yunqing was only a representative. When he thought of this, Lin Feng smiled slightly because he thought of the fact that the true disciples of the various residences were gradually starting to form a small mountain. Chapter 929. Just like there were likes and dislikes between people, there would naturally be like-minded people who were close to each other. It was inevitable that a small circle would be formed. A small circle was neither good nor bad. The specific situation had to be analyzed in detail. From the very first opening of the mountain gate, the disciples gathered around Su Yunxing, Li Xingfei, and Lu Xiafeng. In fact, that was already a relatively preliminary small circle. Later, Lin Feng's direct disciples opened their own caves and accepted second-generation direct disciples. They lived in the same cave residence day and night and learned from the same master. Sometimes, it was easy to destroy the beauty of the cave residence when they were close to each other. They found flaws that the other had not noticed before, but it was also easier to unite and have a common sense of belonging and honor. Apart from that, there would also be people who were close to each cave resident. Most of this was because the leaders of these caves got along well with each other and had a good personal relationship. Therefore, there were more and more disciples in the cave residence. At present, the small mountains in Xianmen Tianzong had gradually begun to divide, but it was still at a very primitive stage. At the same time, it was a harmless stage. On the contrary, just like how Han Yang provoked Tan Yunqing, the small mountains also had a relationship of healthy competition with each other, which promoted the internal prosperity of the sect. Sometimes, a group of harmonious people often meant a pool of stagnant water. Because there was no conflict of interests involved, and the real helmsman of each cave residence, the first-generation disciple, Xiao Yan, and the others, had a harmonious relationship, it seemed to be beneficial and harmless at present. But if there was a conflict of interests involved, the situation might deteriorate, but it was still controllable and stable. In fact, most of the sects and big forces in the world were basically in this state internally. Forming cliques was not scary, but forming cliques for personal interests and even internal strife was terrible. What was even more frightening was that there would be a divergence of opinion on the overall policy, or a dispute over the highest authority. That would be very dangerous. The Void Temple could already be considered a very good situation, and the Reincarnation sect was a standard counterexample. Present, there were two biggest mountains in Xianmen Tianzong, and the other circles were basically more or less around these two mountains. One was Xiao Yan's Fenshan Cliff, and the other was Zhu Yi's Qian Tian Palace. Xiao Yan and Zhu Yi, on the other hand, didn't have any intention of fighting, and their relationship had always been pretty good. But their respective disciples gradually formed the two largest mountains within the sect. In the early days of the heavenly sect of Xianmen, Zhu Yi was the chief instructor of the foundation disciples. At that time, almost all the disciples who entered the sect treated him as a half-teacher. In addition, all the disciples in the Qi refining stage practiced the simplified version of the 8 diagrams of the Great Way of the Heavens and the easy 8 diagrams of the Way of the 8 diagrams compiled by him. Therefore, after the foundation disciples passed the assessment and became true disciples, a considerable number of people chose to worship Zhu Yi in the Heaven Palace. In reality, up until now, even if it's the direct disciples of other caves, if they still haven't reached foundation establishment, the Tao techniques they practice are also the easy Bagua Taoist canon. Xiao Yan and the others also use it to teach their own Qi disciple stage disciples until they reach foundation establishment. Therefore, until now, Zhu Yi's Qian Tian Palace had always been the sect with the most inherited disciples among the 8 cave. There were also many talented disciples in Qian Tian Palace. Before the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Conference, except for Dao Yuding, who had a special situation, Su Yunxing and Ing Luozha had always been known as the top 2 of the second-generation inherited disciples. Other than that, there were also outstanding disciples like Sun Shuer, as well as the rising star Yang Tai, who had risen to prominence after the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Assembly and made everyone raise their eyebrows in surprise but became the first-seat disciple of the Qian Tian Palace. During the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Conference, Qian Tian Palace took 4 of the top 16 places, and Sun Shuer also made it to the top 16. They were really in the limelight for a while. But after the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Conference, the situation gradually changed. First of all, although Zhou Yunsong didn't mean it, he did amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, breaking the previous competition between Su Yunxing and Ing Luozha. Then, when the second-generation inherited disciples began to break through to the golden elixir period, Xiao Yan's Fun Tianya's line caught up. Lin Tong, Tang Jun, and Lu Xiaofeng succeeded in forming their cores, overshadowing Qian Tian Palace, which only had Ing Luozha and Su Yunxing. Especially Lin Tong, although he formed his core later than Ing Luozha. He passed the Yin fire tribulation first and reached the middle stage of the golden elixir, which made Fun Tianya's momentum soar. In addition, Fun Tianya's disciples chose to cultivate the Nan Ming orthodox method and refine the Nan Mingli fire, which was more beneficial for weapon forging and alchemy, which also attracted the younger disciples. After Su Yunsheng left the sect and went to the mystic heaven realm, there was no news of him. Ing Luozha was the only one left to support the Qian Tian Palace. Ing Luozha's personality was more eccentric, and the head disciple Yang Tai had not formed his core, which inevitably weakened the Qian Tian Palace. Although they still dominated the number of second-generation inherited disciples, they were less attractive to the third-generation inherited disciples. After the most recent assessment for the promotion of foundation disciples to inherited disciples, the number of people who became Funtianya's disciples had already surpassed the number of people who became Qian Tian Palace's disciples. But the Qian Tian Palace's foundation was still there. It was just that before the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Conference, the situation where there were many strong people became the two heroes of Funtianya. And in the other caves, He Luoju's line was led by Tan Yunqing, who had a good relationship with Yang Tai and the others of the Qian Tian Palace. Although Tan Yunqing was not on good terms with Ing Luozha, she had a good relationship with Yang Tai. And on the other side, Luo Qingwu's light dance pavilion only had Han Yang, but he had a good relationship with Huang Zhenting of the Desolate Sky Valley, Lu Xiafeng and Tang Jun of Funtianya, so he was close to Funtianya. The situation of Snow Wind Valley and Desolate Sky Valley was more special. Zhao Huan of Snow Wind Valley, Huang Zhenting of Desolate Sky Valley, and Tang Jun and Lu Xiafeng of Funtianya were close friends. They were like-minded and could chat together. And Kujing of Snow Wind Valley was best friends with Sun Shuer of the Qian Tian Palace, and they had a good relationship. Zhuge Wanqiu of Desolate Sky Valley was also close to the Qian Tian Palace. Among them, most of the disciples of Snow Wind Valley gathered around Zhao Huan, and although Zhuge Wanqiu was not the first-seat disciple of Desolate Sky Valley, she had a great influence on Huang Zhenting. Of course, Huang Zhenting also had a great influence on her. Other than that, there was Fan Lingju's faction. Fan Lingju's faction had a large number of disciples, and they had Dao Yuding and Li Xingfei, the two successors of the Golden Elixir period, so their strength was extraordinary, especially Dao Yuding, who had the highest cultivation among the second-generation direct disciples. Dao Yuding and Zhou Yunsong had similar personalities and styles, and they rarely interacted with others, so Fan Lingju's faction was led by Li Xingfei. And Li Xingfei had a good relationship with Yang Tai, Tan Yunqing, Lu Xiafeng, and Tang Jun, so Fan Lingju's position was more neutral. As for Snow Wind Valley and Desolate Sky Valley, their situations were more special, and they would sometimes lean towards neutrality. The most special person was naturally Zhou Yunsong of Nirvana Cave. Compared to Han Yang, he was truly a lone ranger. Among his peers, the only ones he could talk to were Lu Xiafeng and Zhao Huan, and he did not interact with the others. The division of the factions within Xianmen Tianzong was actually very simple, and it did not involve conflicts of interest. It was even a little forced to say that it was a fight of personal feelings. At most, it could be said that there were differences in the way they did things, and there were differences in the way they viewed people and things. This also had something to do with their respective masters. Funtianya's faction, along with Han Yang, Huang Zhenting, and the others, were more relaxed. On the other hand, except for Ing Luozi, the successors of Qian Tian Palace and He Luoju were more focused on the system and discipline. Therefore, although the two sides were not clearly divided into factions, they actually did not form opposing emotions. There were also many interactions between them, and many times they even teased each other. As for helping each other, there were even more. Just like between Han Yang and Tan Yunqing, the two sides were always thinking about how to improve themselves, surpass the other side, and prove that their way of thinking was more correct, and not to undermine each other and dig holes. It was also because of this that Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others did not really care about this, as long as they did not deviate from the general direction, and no one walked on the wrong path, they would not interfere too much. It was still the same old saying, people have different ways of thinking, and different ways of doing things. Forcing people to be the same as ants and bees was an unrealistic way of thinking. Two saw blades, both saw teeth facing outwards, and the flat mouth facing inwards. Combined together, they were facing outwards. This was the best situation. No matter how bad it was, both saw teeth were facing inwards, but they were seamless, crisscrossed, and joined together into one. This was also very good. Both saw teeth were facing inwards, yet they were still opposing each other and clashing with each other. Internal friction was something that Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others could not tolerate, and they would definitely not let it happen. It was naturally not wrong to nip problems in the bud. From the current situation, the situation was still very good, and healthy competition between each other actually encouraged each other to work hard. This kind of competition was beneficial and harmless, and Lin Feng and his disciple both encouraged it. At the same time, everything was within their control, and they could correct it at any time. This small internal disturbance caused by Han Yang and Tan Yunqing quickly subsided, and it did not cause any waves. Even Chu Yang, who was traveling with them, did not notice any clues, let alone the others. Seeing Xianmen Tianzong's group leave directly, the people of the Great Zhou dynasty, from King Liang Fu of Yan Liang to the soldiers of the Divine Martial Army, actually all secretly sighed in relief. While Liang Fu and Cloudborn were relieved, they also paid attention to Xianmen Tianzong's group. Although they did not personally see Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao fight at close range, seeing Yang Qing and the others fight already made their hearts sink slightly. Moreover, Han Yang, Huang Zhenting, and the other younger disciples also displayed amazing abilities at their current cultivation level, and this made Liang Fu and Cloudborn feel even more bitter. The current Xianmen Tianzong was really on the right track, and its foundation was becoming more solid. Cloudborn's eyes flashed slightly. This is a source magnetic steel mine, and it is completely isolated from the outside world. Although they are strong, this place can be used to their advantage. Liang Fu shook his head and looked at him sternly. Do not underestimate the methods of the Master of the Mystic Gate, and do not underestimate his disciples. Let's not talk about whether or not they will succeed. Even if they succeed, once the news is leaked, do you hope that the Master of the Mystic Gate will let go of his dispute with Golden Cicada and immediately return to the Divine Land to harm the Great Zhou dynasty? Everyone needs time to develop. If this continues, perhaps it will be more beneficial to Xianmen Tianzong, and it will allow Xianmen Tianzong to leave the Great Zhou dynasty even further behind. However, it is still better than us working for others. Liang Fu said in a low voice, we need an opportunity to reverse the current unfavorable situation. Before that, we can only endure. After a pause, he sighed. The current Xianmen Tianzong has completely surpassed the Great Zhou dynasty. It is not a force that we can fight alone. Chapter 930. The dispute between Han Yang and Tan Yunqing only lasted for a short while. On the other side, Zhuge Wanqiu was also looking at Huang Zhenting with a slight frown, a helpless expression on her face. Goldie? Huang Zhenting grinned. I also feel that Junior Brother Tan's method is too tepid. Junior Brother Han's method is more straightforward. Zhuge Wanqiu held her forehead helplessly. In fact, the moment Han Yang made his move, she had already vaguely guessed what Huang Zhenting would do. After all, she had watched Goldie grow up. She understood Goldie even better than her master, Shi Tianhao. Of course, with Goldie's straightforward character, everyone knew what kind of person he was after getting along with him for a long time. Han Yang and Tan Yunqing each had their own plans. Which one was more in line with Goldie's temperament, it was almost needless to ask. Huang Zhenting was no longer as hot-headed as he was when he was a child, but some fundamental things would not easily change. It was precisely because she understood this that Zhuge Wanqiu used the Flying Thunder Ruler to help Goldie and Han Yang at the first instance. Huang Zhenting saw Zhuge Wanqiu's helpless expression and chuckled. "All right, senior sister, I will pay attention next time." Zhuge Wanqiu shook her head in annoyance. Just like Han Yang, Huang Zhenting was the standard. He admitted his mistake with a good attitude and did not mend his ways afterward. "Oh right, senior sister, before we set off, did senior brother Ing Rosa come to find you again?" Huang Zhenting suddenly asked. Zhuge Wanqiu nodded calmly. "That's right, he's here to send us off. He's one of the few among our peers who has entered the infinite wasteland. He's here to share some of his experiences with me, and he's left me some special medicines." Huang Zhenting snorted lightly and did not say anything else. Zhuge Wanqiu looked at him with amusement and poked his forehead. "You!" Huang Zhenting did not shrink his head and let her poke his forehead. He muttered, "Senior sister, if you are with Ing Rosa in the future, he has a strong temper and you have a soft temper. You will be easily bullied by him." To him, Zhuge Wanqiu was like a mother and an older sister, and the two of them had a deep relationship. As for Zhuge Wanqiu, Huang Zhenting didn't have any romantic feelings, it was purely the kinship of a brother and sister. There was an old saying that every brother-in-law was always on guard against a pervert who had his eyes on their beautiful sister. Huang Zhenting was currently in such a situation. He was constantly on high alert, scrutinizing every man who had thoughts about Zhuge Wanqiu. Zhuge Wanqiu looked at him helplessly and shook her head. This was not the first time Goldie had done this. She did not want to talk about it anymore. Unexpectedly, a figure flashed across her mind, causing Zhuge Wanqiu to gently bite her lips. On the other side, Han Yang's laughter could be heard. "Senior sister Zhuge, senior brother Huang, master and martial uncle have let another batch of dust beast into the formation." Zhuge Wanqiu looked over. As expected, she saw Li Yuanfang open the formation and a few more demon commanders and demon general dust beasts charge in. She immediately braced herself and went up to meet them with Han Yang, Huang Zhenting and Tan Yunqing. From Li Yuanfang's orderly and precise movements of releasing dust beasts into the formation for Han Yang and the others to practice with, it could be seen that the current situation was firmly in the hands of Xianmen Tianzong and the others. Even though Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao had not moved the entire time, Yang Qing, who opened the path at the very front, was also invincible. Luo Qingwu, who was responsible for bringing up the rear, did not feel any pressure either. Although she was only at the late stage of the Golden Elixir realm, she was still able to handle the dust beasts at the Demon King level with ease. The profound clarity sword was unsheathed, and rays of sword light spread out, becoming even more dazzling in the already dazzling white magnetite steel vein. The 6 directions represented the 4 directions of heaven and earth. Luo Qingwu's innate 6 directions sword Wei had already cultivated 5 swords, namely the Shaoyin sword of the east, the Taiyin sword of the west, the true Yin sword of the south, the profound Yin sword of the north, and the absolute Yin sword of the Ten Lands. At this moment, Luo Qingwu unsheathed the Taiyin sword of the west and fought against the Demon King Dust. Her Taiyin sword of the west was completely different from the Taiyin sword sect of Mount Shu. The black profound clarity sword accompanied her, turning into rays of pale light in the air. Under the illumination of the magnetite steel vein, it was coated with a faint layer of gold. Wherever the sword light passed, it was like a river of time. Anyone who stepped into it would feel time flow faster. As for Luo Qingwu's own Taiyin sword of the west, the sword light was fast and slow at times. It changed according to her will and was unpredictable. Demon King Dust had a powerful cultivation, but he could not do anything to Luo Qingwu. He wanted to make use of the advantage of the magnetite steel vein to gather the magnetic force to kill Luo Qingwu. However, at this moment, there were rays of emerald light floating around the two of them. They danced non-stop like flames. At the beginning of the battle, Luo Qingwu first used the true Yin sword of the south. The sword light did not dissipate. It was like the true Yin fire of the earth, lasting for a long time. Although it could not completely isolate the magnetic force that Demon King Dust gathered, it had already suppressed the opponent's home ground advantage to the minimum. It was almost negligible. Demon King Dust wanted to break the true Yin sword of the south first, but he could not do so. After the true Yin sword of the south, Luo Qingwu immediately followed up with the Taiyin sword of the west. She attacked directly. The sword light was extremely fast, like water. In the blink of an eye, it had already enveloped Demon King Dust. Demon King Dust wanted to use the power of his Demon King realm to break through the void and retreat. However, he was shocked to find that his speed was so slow that he could not even break through the void when his opponent's sword light had already reached him. Shocked, Demon King Cho Chen's ferocious nature was aroused in the face of Luo Qingwu, who was already very close to him. He didn't dodge, and the third vertical eye between his eyebrows suddenly lit up with an extremely bright white light. In the next instant, an extremely terrifying ray of vital magnetic treasure light shot out and struck toward Luo Qingwu with a momentum that could penetrate the heavens and the earth. It was an attack against an attack. He wanted to force Luo Qingwu to withdraw her sword to defend herself or retreat so that he could win a chance of survival. The powerful magnetic treasure light directly distorted time and space. Although Demon King Cho Chen himself was still slowed down by the sword intent of Luo Qingwu's Western Tai Yin sword, the magnetic treasure light broke free from its shackles and violently passed through the void that was already very close to Luo Qingwu. When he activated the magnetic beam as a Demon King, his strength was much stronger than that of a demon commander or demon general. The magnetic beam twisted and snaked forward. It drew the surrounding space and the magnetic light in the ore vein together. It constantly gathered and spun like a giant drill. Its target was Luo Qingwu. Luo Qingwu smiled. As the sword light flipped, it was as if it was dancing, graceful and gorgeous. Her sword Dao was not a martial arts technique that involved stabbing and killing, nor was it an ordinary sword control technique. Although she could also perform these techniques, the core of the sword Dao was a mysterious concept of being a companion with the sword and resonating with each other. The pale Western Taiyin sword's sword light became dazzling as it spun. It transformed into a strange wave of light that sealed Demon King Cho Chen's vital magnetic treasure light. Amidst the waves of light, a dazzling red light suddenly burst out, like a silver bottle bursting out of a broken bottle, or a cavalry charging out. It was extremely dazzling, but it also brought a lingering shadow of death to Demon King Cho Chen's heart. Luo Qingwu's Khanate Six Directions Sword Dao, Shaoyin Sword of the East. A red light flashed across the void. Under Demon King Dust's angry and unwilling gaze, it landed on the third vertical eye in between his eyebrows. After blinding this vertical eye, it pierced through his entire head. The next moment, Luo Qingwu had already sheathed her sword and stood still, leaving Demon King Cho Chen dumbfounded on the spot. His body, which was originally flashing with white light, suddenly cracked like a broken porcelain. Rays of red light emerged from the cracks, and finally, he collapsed weakly on the spot. After killing a Demon King Cho Chen, Luo Qingwu looked ahead. In addition to Yang Qing, who was the vanguard, Chu Yang was following behind her. At this moment, not only Luo Qingwu, but Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and Li Yuanfang also looked at Chu Yang. Even Yang Qing, who was walking at the front, actually split some of her attention to the black-robed young man beside her. Chu Yang's expression was calm. He followed Yang Qing's footsteps and swept away Cho Chen, who was blocking the way. However, the technique he used at this moment was not the Nine Heavens divine sword that he had used before. Han Yang, who was at the foundation establishment stage, could use his fingers as a sword. Chu Yang, who was already at the late stage of the golden elixir, naturally could also use the Nine Heavens divine sword without a sword. However, at this moment, he did not use the 9 heavens divine sword. Instead, he used another technique. Beside him, 2 blood-red long swords floated and danced in the air to defend against the enemy. They were not real flying swords, but 2 magic swords condensed from crimson blood. Although under Chu Yang's control, his aura was somewhat restrained. Whether it was Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang, or Luo Qingwu, all of them could clearly recognize that what Chu Yang used to condense the magic swords was the true water of the Blood River. The most filthy and filthy true water of the Blood River originated from the tainted blood of the Nether Blood River. It was accustomed to polluting the spiritual qi and spiritual objects of the world. Although Chu Yang's secret technique was quite unique and the disgusting stench of the true water of the Blood River was almost gone, Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and the others could still recognize the dermic power fluctuation and its origin at a glance. After all, Lin Feng had previously captured the former King Qingguang of the Nether Hall and seized his Blood River painting Dharma treasure. Xianmen Tianzong had the method to refine the true water of the Blood River and had real true water of the Blood River. Naturally, Wang Lin and the others would not mistake it. However, it was also because of this that Xianmen Tianzong and the others were somewhat interested when they saw Chu Yang condense the magic swords with the true water of the Blood River. After all, it was not an easy task to refine and control the true water of the Blood River. Previously, only the super demon sect of the ancient times, the Blood River sect, could freely refine and control the true water of the Blood River. King Qingguang was a remnant of the Blood River sect, but the inheritance he received was not complete. However, in the inheritance of the Blood River sect, there were people who refined the Nether Blood Lotus, the Boundless Blood Sea, and the Blood God, but they had never heard of anyone refining the Blood River magic swords like Chu Yang's. After all, the number 1 enemy of the Blood River sect was the Mount Shu Sword sect. From the founder of the Blood River sect, Taoist Blood River, all the way down, they did not have a good impression of the sword Tao. Knowing this, Xianmen Tianzong and the others looked at the 2 Blood River magic swords of Chu Yang with playful expressions on their faces. Chapter 931. Shi Tianhao looked at Chu Yang's 2 Blood River divine swords with interest as he asked casually, "As far as I know, the Blood River sect doesn't have such a technique, right?" Li Yuanfang said silently, "As far as we know, the Blood River sect was founded by the founder, Taoist Blood River. Back then, the sect's treasures were the Bloodbath Milky Way diagram and a blood phoenix. The mystic techniques that the sect cultivates are mainly divided into 3 branches." Shi Tianhao asked using dermic power, and Li Yuanfang replied using dermic power as well. However, his voice could only be heard by his senior and junior brothers and sisters, but not by Chu Yang and the other junior disciples. First, refine the netherworld blood lotus. Along the way, countless lotuses will bloom, and the sea of blood will overflow, turning into a boundless sea of blood. Eldest senior brother and second senior brother encountered the Blood River Heavenly Lord, who was the embodiment of the Qin dynasty's Shi Xingyun, in the core illusion of the Yingzhou Immortal Mountain, and he was proficient in this technique. Li Yuanfang continued, "Second, refine the netherworld blood river and continuously accumulate blood river true water. This is the simplest and most direct method, but when the blood river is powerful to a certain extent, it is even more powerful than the boundless sea of blood. The Blood River sect's treasure, the peak Mahayana grade Dharma treasure, the Bloodbath Milky Way diagram, was refined using this method." At that moment, the former King Qingguang of the Underworld Hall, who was on Wang Lin's Xiantian God sealing banner, also cultivated according to this method. Third, refine the blood shadow. When it is strengthened to a certain extent, the blood shadow can advance to become a blood god. Not only will it be powerful in battle, but it can also split into tens of thousands of clones. As long as the blood god is not destroyed, the cultivator will not die. At this point, Li Yuanfang paused slightly before continuing. This is also one of the most notorious demonic techniques in the history of the Divine Land. To strengthen the blood shadow, one must kill and devour the essence and blood of living beings. Back then, the Blood River sect was hated by all. Other than the fact that the Blood River true water was used to polluting people's spirit chi and spirit treasures, the blood shadow and blood god who cultivated were too vicious. At that time, there were many cultivators in the Blood River sect who not only killed demons for the blood shadow and blood god to devour, but also tortured the human world. The most famous person who cultivated the blood god's method was undoubtedly the ancestor of the Blood River sect, Taoist Blood River. Of course, the other methods of the Blood River sect basically originated from him as well. However, Taoist Blood River's power of 480 million blood gods had left a deep impression on the heaven primal world. This old man was one of the few powerhouses in the history of the diabolism sects in the vast land of the Divine Land. Back then, he was too careless and went to destroy the mountain gate of Mount Shu Sword sect. Mount Shu was flooded with blood, but others attacked him from behind. The clones of the blood god that he used as a retreat were also targeted. As a result, 480 million clones of the blood god were killed, and he was seriously injured. However, when Taoist Blood River challenged Shu Mountain alone, he fought against sword ancestor Ren Changmei, the founder of Shu Mountain, who was in charge of the great immortal heavens manifestation sword formation and used the power of the sword peak. That battle still left a strong mark in the history of the Divine Land. At that time, if Ren Changmei did not have the home advantage and fought against Taoist Blood River on another occasion, he might not be a match for him even with the celestial heaven sword in hand. However, Taoist Blood River was too careless and was tricked by others. All 480 million blood gods were killed by Ren Changmei using the celestial heaven sword and the power of the sword peak to activate the celestial heaven sword formation. Taoist Blood River was seriously injured and had to retreat. Ren Changmei chased with the celestial heaven sword and the experts of Shu Mountain and finally injured Taoist Blood River himself. However, this old devil was really powerful. Even in this situation, he still escaped, stained the celestial heaven sword, and killed many people of Shu Mountain. However, it was also because of the aftereffects of this battle that Taoist Blood River's strength was greatly reduced. Not long after, because his strength had not recovered, he died in another battle. Since Taoist Blood River fell, the Blood River sect gradually declined and finally completely declined. Li Yuanfang said silently, "Although there are still remnants of the Blood River sect's orthodoxy, they are not complete. However, we cannot rule out the possibility that these remnants of the Blood River sect have figured out a new technique." Wang Lin said indifferently, "No. Although the path is completely different, it can be seen that this technique is most likely the result of this fellow Taoist Chu's own creation of the Blood River sect's orthodoxy and the ancient Heavenly Gate's Great Nine Heavens mystical sword." At this point, he looked at Chu Yang. Although it is still in the initial stage, it is already quite unique. After all, whether it is the Great Nine Heavens mystical sword or the Blood River demonic mantra, they are both top-notch orthodoxies. It is already rare for him to take this step. Luo Qingwu laughed. He wants to form the third Blood River mystical sword and reach the number of 3 before attempting the Void Thunder Tribulation to form his nascent soul. Shi Tianhao asked, "Little junior sister, how many swords do you think he will obtain if he forms his nascent soul?" Luo Qingwu thought for a moment and answered, "Not 9, but 12. However, I don't think he will use the Blood River mystical sword to form his nascent soul. He will still use the Great Nine Heavens mystical sword as his foundation, so it will most likely be 9. As Chu Yang's cultivation increased, the power of each Blood River mystical sword would also increase correspondingly. This person really hides himself well, but why is he suddenly so generous today? Luo Qingwu said with a smile. Has he finally understood that I will not be greedy for his fortuitous encounter? Shi Tianhao blinked and his lips curled into a smile. Tunton has not reached the age of maturity, but this fellow has. Little junior sister, have you forgotten Master's warning? He looked at Chu Yang and said with a smile, Little junior sister, don't you think he looks like a courting male peacock spreading its tail at you? Luo Qingwu said with a bitter smile, Little senior brother, don't make fun of me. I've grown up and am no longer the type he likes. Yang Qing, who had been leading the way and hadn't interjected since the beginning, as if all her attention was on Cho Chen, suddenly said, Junior martial sister, you need to be more attentive. This fellow Taoist Chu really has the intention of courting you. You've grown up, but I'm afraid his thoughts haven't stopped and are instead becoming more and more intense. Luo Qingwu straightened her expression. I understand what senior brother Yang Qing said. She looked at Chu Yang and shook her head. I don't have any ill feelings towards this Taoist Chu, but I have no intention of becoming Dao companions with him. Yang Qing said calmly. This Taoist Chu came from beyond Heaven Mountain and suddenly obtained a great opportunity. He has to be careful to avoid getting into trouble because of his wealth. This is the righteous path and cannot be blamed. His cultivation and talent are also outstanding. Even if he doesn't enter our sect, he will have great achievements in the future. If he enters our sect, his prospects will be even more limitless and he might even surpass you and me. Logically speaking, his conditions can be said to be extremely outstanding. However, this person's thoughts are quite heavy and I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to be a good match for you, little junior sister. Although you are quick-witted and intelligent, your temperament is still pure. Once a strand of love is tied to your heart, it will naturally be good if he cannot change his original intentions for the rest of his life. Otherwise, it is very likely that you will be hurt by the tribulation of love. Yang Qing's expression was somewhat lonely. This is a personal matter and as a senior brother, I really shouldn't meddle too much in it. That's why I've said this today, and I won't mention it again in the future. I'm only saying this in hopes that junior sister will think twice before you act. The person who ultimately makes the decision is still you. Luo Qingwu sternly said, Senior brother doesn't need to explain. You're doing this for Xiao Wu's sake. Xiao Wu understands and is very grateful. She really was very grateful. As a direct disciple junior sister, she knew about the regretful matter between Yang Qing and Fang Ting. She also knew that today's matter might provoke Yang Qing's sorrow. Under such circumstances, Yang Qing still had the spirit to care for her. How could Luo Qingwu not understand? Luo Qingwu glanced at Chu Yang's back and said softly, I don't know why, but Xiao Wu feels as if she has some kind of connection with this person. Although this feeling is faint, it truly exists. Only, I don't know what the connection is. But no matter what the connection is, right now Xiao Wu really can't develop feelings for him. In the future, everything will follow her heart. Xiao Wu won't hesitate to move forward, and also won't be blindly impulsive. She suddenly laughed softly. Besides, it's not like Xiao Wu has to marry. Staying on the mountain and always learning from Master is very good. Shi Tianhao laughed. Haha, someone's going to be an old lady. Luo Qingwu snorted. Little senior brother wants Xiao Wu to be an old lady. You want to save on the congratulatory gifts for Xiao Wu, right? Shi Tianhao laughed. That's natural. Your senior brother is very poor. Luo Qingwu smiled craftily. Is it because all the good treasures are in little senior brother's stomach? Although they were in the complicated environment of the magnetic steel vein and faced the siege of so many enemies, Xianmen Tianzong's group was still very relaxed. Lin Feng's avatar watched this scene silently and smiled inwardly. He looked at Chu Yang and thought, perhaps he wants to attract Xiao Wu's attention, but based on his past performance, he shouldn't be so shallow. It seems that he also wants to get closer to our sect, so he is showing his sincerity. However, I don't think he wants to join our sect. Instead, he wants to deepen the position of Beyond Heaven Mountain in our sect. After all, if he wants to obtain the corresponding benefits and position, he has to display the corresponding strength. At the very least, he can look forward to his potential. Lin Feng smiled. But even if he doesn't do it on purpose, I'm afraid he still has the intention to seek the phoenix. If a man can arouse a woman's curiosity, especially under a positive impression, it's really not bad to arouse a woman's desire to explore. Constantly showing off one's outstanding side, going deeper, there will always be surprises. While constantly raising people's expectations, he also has the ability to satisfy these expectations. Lin Feng thought rather unscrupulously. Unfortunately, the peacock's tail is not fake. It's just that, young man, your male peacock's tail seems to be spreading in the wrong direction. It's facing away from the female peacock you want to attract. The male peacock's tail feathers were magnificent. After spreading its tail, it attracted the female peacock to achieve its goal. From the front, of course it was beautiful, but from the back, it was a bit, hiss. Lin Feng sucked in a breath of cold air, and stopped himself from thinking further. Chapter 932. Although Shi Tianhao and the others were teasing Luo Qingwu, but just like Lin Feng, according to their understanding of Chu Yang in the past, they all knew that Chu Yang would not be so bored as to do something like a peacock spreading its tail. Perhaps he had this intention subconsciously, but from Chu Yang's point of view, his original intention was to further express his sincerity. Before the battle of exterminating Xian, during the incident at Beyond Heaven Mountain, although Li Baitao and the rest conspired against Xu Shan, Wu Yunliang, Meng Chaoran and Chu Yang all stood on the right side. After that, in order to avoid Xu Shan's revenge, they even abandoned their ancestral foundation at Beyond Heaven Mountain and followed Xiao Yan, Li Yuanfang and the rest back to Yujing Mountain. Lin Feng and his disciples would naturally not treat the people of Mount Shu unfairly. After the battle of destroying Xian Mountain, Lin Feng's sword suppressed Mount Shu. The power of Mount Shu sword sect shrank like never before. They were trapped in a corner of West Shu and directly sealed the mountain. After the safety of Mount Shu, after an internal discussion, Wu Yunliang and others decided to return to the original mountain gate. After this battle, unless Xu Shan could once again suppress the Xian Men Heavenly Sect, they would most likely not cause trouble for Beyond Heaven Mountain, because it was meaningless. Instead, it would make their actions laughable, and it would even lead to bad consequences. However, in order to prevent people from Mount Shu from acting irrationally out of desperation, Wu Yunliang still arranged for some people to open another mansion in the northern foothills of Kunlun Mountain as a foolproof plan. In this regard, Xianmen Tianzong opened the door wide. At the same time, there were many rewards and compensation in various aspects of resources. But whether it was Wu Yunliang, Meng Chaoran, or Chu Yang, they all clearly understood that this round of harvest could not be effective forever. The celestial sect of the celestial sect of wonders would naturally not do such a stingy thing. However, if their own family did not improve, then they would naturally be marginalized. After the Battle of Mount Shu, not only the original Purple Cloud Path, Northern Militant Royal Court, Celerita's Swordsmanship Sect, Thunderbolt Sword Sect, and Wilderness Sword Sect, but other big and small sects would gradually move closer to Xianmen Tianzong. There were limited spots at the top of the mountain, and the spots halfway up the mountain were equally popular. If one did not live up to expectations, they would only be squeezed out by others. Xianmen Tianzong cherished old friendships and pushed the mud up the wall. However, if the mud was always mud, it would fall back down one day. After all, forging iron depended on one's own strength. After getting rid of Li Baitao's group, Chu Yang finally revealed some of his cultivation secrets to his master Meng Chao Ran and sect master Wu Yunliang. While the two of them were shocked, they eagerly absorbed the nourishment and began to diligently cultivate. However, at the moment it was only limited to Wu Yunliang and Meng Chaoran. Slowly planning for further development was needed. Moreover, it was only a part of the secret. There were many things that Chu Yang still buried in his heart, especially the future that seemed like a dream, but also like a reality. This matter would forever rot in his heart. On the other hand, on Xianmen Tianzong's side, Chu Yang revealed more things. Just as Lin Feng and the others thought, in order to fight for better conditions, he had to reveal the corresponding strength. At the very least, it had to be worth looking forward to. In the battle against the Nine Serenities Ghost Monkey, Chu Yang had already revealed the Great Nine Heavens Heavenly Sword. Therefore, this time, after entering the magnetic steel mine, Chu Yang revealed another of his trump cards. The two Blood River Heavenly Swords that he had comprehended and refined. Through observation, Chu Yang had long determined that, unlike others, even if he revealed the Great Nine Heavens Heavenly Sword and the Blood River Heavenly Method, Lin Feng and his disciples would not covet them. At most, they would be a little curious and interested. Moreover, Lin Feng and the others would not leak this matter, so Chu Yang had nothing to hide. Even though he was a calm and meticulous person, Chu Yang's heart was also filled with passion and vigor. He also yearned to wield his sword and sing with joy. Of course, he did not deny that in the depths of his heart, when Luo Qingwu was in front of him, he could not control his state of mind. What a pity, young man! With a change of environment and experience, you might really be able to win over this little disciple of mine. Lin Feng looked at Chu Yang and laughed inwardly. A true son of heaven? With a shake of his body and a release of his domineering aura, the girl would probably faint from the suffocation. Why would he need to make himself look like a bullied wife, walking with great caution and difficulty? Lin Feng laughed unscrupulously in his heart. But, I have a total of 4 people like you here, and they all have all kinds of styles. There's a man with unrivaled heroism and righteousness that reaches the clouds. There's a gentleman who is well-read but not pedantic, modest and courteous while at the same time bursting with heroism. There's a cool, elegant, noble, demonic, wild, cool, handsome and domineering CEO. There's also a childhood friend who can always play with, laugh with, and get into trouble with. Lin Feng repeatedly shook his head. This is the environment my Xiao Wu grew up in. She grew up surrounded by 4 times the domineering aura. Breathing in the domineering aura is like breathing air. If she could easily faint from the suffocation, then I would have peace of mind even if I gave her a dowry. Tisk tsk, girls really need to be raised well. Thinking of this, Lin Feng sighed. The ancients really didn't deceive me. While Lin Feng was letting his imagination run wild, Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, Chu Yang and the others had already gone down, breaking through the Chou Chen clan's obstruction and entering the cave at the center of the mine. Inside was a tunnel that led deeper into the vein. Going down through the tunnel, they could clearly feel the magnetic force getting stronger and stronger. At this moment, for Chu Yang, Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang, Luo Qingwu and the others, the opponent they had to pay attention to first was not the Chou Chen clan, but the almost tangible magnetic force. Without the Chou Chen clan's guidance, the magnetic force in the surrounding space had already gradually condensed into a fluctuating magnetic light. Shi Tianhao's expression didn't change, his relaxed smile still on his face. However, his primitive and vast desolate aura had already spread out, helping his fellow disciples who hadn't reached the primordial spirit stage to block the magnetic light. The Chou Chen beasts had already been killed in large numbers, and the remaining were gradually retreating. Facing Xianmen Tianzong's group now, they had already lost the courage to stop them. What do we do? Looking at the direction, they're heading straight for the marrow. On the other side of the vein, a majestic Chou Chen demon king looked at an old Chou Chen beast beside him. Slowly, the old Chou Chen shook his head. Since the formation is useless against them, we can't stop them. Our children will only die in vain if they go. Young Chou Chen said anxiously. The first group only had their eyes on the magnetic steel ore. Now, this group is going straight for the marrow. What should we do? Old Chochin said, we should focus on the first group. We can only let the second group go. Just now, I sensed through the formation that another expert has entered. This time, it's not the human race, but the demon race experts. Maybe they're here for these people. I understand. Then let the children retreat first, young Chochin said quietly. That young Chochin said silently. Suddenly, he came to a realization. Do you think they're also here for the mysterious space beneath the marrow? Old Chochin nodded. You're right. This second group is completely different from the first group. I'm afraid that's the case. Young Chochin suddenly chuckled. That's great. After that great sage entered the mysterious space, he hasn't come out yet. This second group of humans is very strong. Especially those two youths who don't fight much, I can't see through them. They're terrifying. Old Chochin said, but if the demon experts that enter later are indeed here for them, then it's enough to take care of them. Young Chochin said hatefully, they've killed so many of our children. We must bury them in this vein. Old Chochin frowned. They're close to the marrow. It's not convenient for the formation to detect their movements. Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and the others went down to the deepest part of the vein and officially stepped into the marrow. The white magnetic light in front of them disappeared and was replaced by darkness. It was as if they were in a black tunnel. But the disappearance of the white magnetic light did not mean that the magnetic force had weakened. On the contrary, the magnetic force was unprecedentedly strong. Even Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao could not transmit their consciousness out in this environment. They could only see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and use their five senses to interact with the outside world. Yang Qing and the others had to be under the protection of Shi Tianhao's mana to move normally. Otherwise, such a strong magnetic force would not only isolate their consciousness, but also hurt their bodies. Wang Lin looked at the black tunnel and said calmly, it's not a solid tunnel. Although the walls and ground exist, there's actually a large amount of powder floating in the air. They're pulled by the extremely strong magnetic force, forming an illusory scene that looks like a solid. If one wanted to dig out the marrow from here, one would have to dig out a lot of fluffy powder. Only after leaving this environment where the magnetic force was dense would the fluffy powder gather together due to its own magnetic force and compress into a real solid with a very small volume. Digging out a piece of marrow that looked like the size of a house might not even be as big as a fist when brought out. Shi Tianhao nodded, that's right. This magnetic steel vein is even bigger than the one in our mystic realm. The magnetic force in the marrow is also stronger. However, it feels like an arrow at the end of its flight. It's strong but lacks stamina, showing signs of weakening. Wang Lin looked up and down. In a situation where there's no excessive mining and destruction, this vein's natural regeneration should be very strong. There's probably another reason why it's showing signs of weakening. The opportunity that Master spoke of might be here. Shi Tianhao chuckled, we'll slowly look for it later. Right now, let's welcome the bug behind us first. After getting far away from the great Zhou dynasty's people, the compass in their hands began to work again, pointing behind them. But now, the needle of the compass gradually stabilized, indicating that someone was getting closer and closer. Whether it was the person who had entered the vein behind them or the people of the great Zhou dynasty, Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao naturally wouldn't let the other party cause trouble. Shi Tianhao looked around and felt the terrifying magnetic force. He said with a smile, this place is actually not bad. As he spoke, his magic treasure, the purple crown of ascension, appeared. With a flash of purple lightning, it immediately resonated with the magnetic force in the surroundings. In almost an instant, the nearby magnetic steel vein was drowned in a sea of purple lightning. Chapter 933. Shi Tianhao activated the purple crown of ascension, and the lightning-type spirit power contained in it immediately merged with the rich magnetic force in the essence magnetic steel vein, producing a terrifying resonance. Duo! Shi Tianhao bellowed, and a thick pillar of air that seemed to be clear yet turbid shot out from the top of his body. After wrapping around his body, it directly turned into a huge primordial Tai Chi diagram. In the Tai Chi diagram, there were countless giant beasts floating up and down, and an ancient primordial aura emanated. The purple crown of ascension merged with Shi Tianhao's essence soul incarnation, and rolling lightning flashed continuously, triggering a massive amount of magnetic force in the essence magnetic steel vein. It was even more terrifying. One after another, array patterns and talismans constructed by lightning appeared on the Tai Chi diagram, and gradually intertwined to form an extremely terrifying giant array. This was a powerful array formation that Shi Tianhao had gradually figured out under Lin Feng's guidance after he had attained his essence Soul Dao. It was called the Nine Heavens Divine Thunder Array, and it was extremely ferocious and destructive. The core of its power was the Nine Heavens Divine Thunder, which was the same as the Purple Firmament Dao Guardian Array, the Nine Heavens Divine Thunder Emperor Capital Array. Although its foundation was not as thick as the Purple Firmament Peak Array, which had been accumulated over a long period of time, its power was already on the right track. In particular, Shi Tianhao's divine powers and dermic powers were astonishing, far beyond that of ordinary essence soul incarnation cultivators. Under his activation, the power of the array formation was even more tyrannical. Usually, it would trigger the natural heavenly thunder in the outside world, but now it was triggering the magnetic force in the essence magnetic steel vein. The array formation had not been officially activated, but its power was already more terrifying than the array formation that the Chou Chun clan had activated previously. During his days in Tianhuang Vastland, Shi Tianhao would also use his free time to figure out this array formation divine power. Swap the 284th formation pattern with the 285th formation pattern. The 1769th formation pattern is wrong and needs to be corrected. Li Yuanfang looked at the ninth heaven thunder formation that Shi Tianhao had set up carefully and meticulously. Shi Tianhao adopted all of these suggestions. Even though he had proven his primordial spirit, he was still slightly inferior to Li Yuanfang in terms of array formations. Previously, before setting up the array formation, he had specially communicated with Li Yuanfang to listen to Li Yuanfang's opinions so that the power of the array formation could be stronger. Li Yuanfang frowned slightly. The 3027th formation pattern. It was rare for him to be stuck, but it wasn't because there was an obstacle. It was because time was of the essence, and he didn't have enough time to verify his calculations. This formation pattern did not seem to be wrong to Li Yuanfang, but he had some ideas that it might be possible to make the array formation stronger after adjusting the formation pattern. However, this needed to be verified. Li Yuanfang had never come to a conclusion about things that had not been verified. Hence, after a slight pause, he continued, "Keep the 3027th formation pattern as it is for now. You can use the Yang retreat technique for the 3988th formation pattern. The effect will be better while communicating with Shi Tianhao." Li Yuanfang also set up an array diagram. Invisible and formless astral winds appeared one after another, twisting the limited space in the mineral vein into pieces. It was the fierce and indestructible Nine Heavens formless astral wind. The array diagram that Li Yuanfang set up was the Nine Heavens formless astral wind array diagram that Lin Feng had obtained after destroying the Wind God sect in the past. The array diagram was damaged at that time. After a short repair by Lin Feng, although its power was not as good as before, it could still be used. Shi Tianhao and others had used it when they first went to the Kuanping hidden treasure. Later, Lin Feng completely repaired the array diagram. After continuous analysis and deduction by him and Li Yuanfang, it was even more powerful than when it was at its peak in the past. In retrospect, the wind god sect in the past made Lin Feng think that the nine heavens formless wind array diagram was the most valuable thing, besides the Tianho golden bead. It was even rarer and more precious than the primordial spirit practitioner and the Tianfeng treasure fan. It was a very good array formation, although it was not as good as the top formations such as the Yin and Yang life and death formation, the Vairocana formation, and the nine luminaries sky-shattering formation. Its power was also extremely outstanding. It was also one of the rare mountain-protecting formations that could move. Its geographical conditions, or the source of power, was the astral wind layer above the sky. At this moment, Li Yuanfang's hands kept changing the incantation. The nine heavens formless wind array directly communicated with the astral wind layer above the ninth heaven, which was densely covered with the most primitive nine heavens formless wind, which could split the sky and the earth and destroy everything. At this moment, Li Yuanfang's cultivation was still low. Although his attainments in formations were high, there was still a limit to the power to activate such a formation. Therefore, at this moment, he was assisting Shi Tianhao. Step by step, he handed over the control of the nine heavens formless wind array to Shi Tianhao. He communicated with Shi Tianhao and asked Shi Tianhao to activate the nine heavens thunder formation and the nine heavens formless wind array at the same time. Above the primordial Tai Chi diagram transformed by Shi Tianhao's primordial spirit, at this moment, the astral wind and the thunderbolts were constantly colliding, turning into an even more terrifying death zone. The mutual generation of wind and thunder was originally Shi Tianhao's unique skill. At this moment, with the help of Li Yuanfang, he activated it with the power of the formation, and obtained an even more terrifying power of wind and thunder. Among the various magic skills of Shi Tianhao, the infinite wind and thunder technique was the first magic skill he comprehended after practicing the Tao Te Ching of heaven taught by Lin Feng. Nowadays, it was rarely used, but it was not because the power of this magic skill was insufficient. On the contrary, the wind and thunder surged, constantly transforming each other, and the increase of power was almost infinite. The key to limiting its power was actually Shi Tianhao's own endurance. Today, when Shi Tianhao had proved his primordial spirit, the limit of the infinite wind and thunder power that he could bear was extremely terrifying. In theory, as long as he was given enough time to prepare, this was his most powerful magic skill in terms of the scale of power. However, the problem was here. At this point, the battle of the primordial spirit level was ever-changing, and in the blink of an eye, it could be thousands of rounds of confrontation. Therefore, Shi Tianhao needed time to prepare the infinite wind and thunder technique, so he gradually used it less. However, today, he was here to specially set up a trap, so this problem did not exist. Therefore, Shi Tianhao decisively used this powerful trump card again. Not only did he use the infinite wind and thunder technique again, but with the help of Li Yuanfang, he activated the nine heavens thunder formation and the nine heavens strong wind formation together, thus obtaining an even more powerful power of wind and thunder, even exceeding the current personal limit of Shi Tianhao. Shi Tianhao and Li Yuanfang were busy at the side, and Wang Lin was not idle either. He directly took off his human form and revealed the primordial spirit incarnation of the Netherworld Tai Chi diagram. Above the Netherworld Tai Chi diagram, a demonic gate suddenly opened. The world inside was empty, and there was only a dot of light. Then, a line extended from the dot of light, and stopped at another dot of light. Then, a line continued to extend from this dot of light, and stopped at the next dot of light, and so on and so forth. In the next moment, the demon gate closed, and the karma line that extended all the way suddenly reversed. The last technique of Wang Lin's four symbols realm technique, the karma realm. At the same time that he used the karma realm, Wang Lin also took out the mysterious sky ceiling flag. A black-robed Dharma treasure, the the primordial spirit Feng Tianjun appeared. After communicating with Wang Lin, Feng Tianjun patted the flagpole, and light flashed on the flag, and a person descended. However, it was not the strongest person on the mysterious sky ceiling flag, the former hall master of the underworld hall, Su Anda. Instead, it was the weakest of the 3 Dao integration experts on the flag, the sect master of the human Dao of the reincarnation sect, Zhang Enrui. Zhang Enrui sighed and followed Feng Tianjuan's instructions. He closed his eyes, opened his mouth, and exhaled a breath that reeked of alcohol. This alcohol was not pungent, nor did it have any special smell, but it could make people fall into a state of unconsciousness. Naturally, it had no effect on Dao integration experts or great demons of the unification of the stars and souls. However, this alcohol engulfed the space where Shi Tianhao was, causing his opponents to involuntarily ignore Shi Tianhao, who was accumulating power and waiting there. Although they were in the pith region of the vital magnetic steel mine, and even a Dao integration expert's divine sense couldn't be used to detect them, Shi Tianhao's infinite wind thunder technique, which was activated by the 2 spell formations, was simply too powerful. Furthermore, it was clearly hostile. Liang Fu, riding Cloud Immortal, and the other cultivators of the great Zhou dynasty would not be able to detect them. However, if it was a great demon from before, there might be a risk of being detected. At the level of the Uao Dragon King and the ancestral crocodile Great Sage, even in an environment like the Spirit Steel Mine, their spiritual senses were still extremely sharp. It was hard to tell from afar, but when it was close, they would be very sensitive to danger. Therefore, Wang Lin first used his karma realm to help Shi Tianhao conceal his opponent's sudden inspiration, and then let Zhang Enrui conceal himself further. In other places this method might not have worked. After all, a powerhouse's soul could not sense danger, but they could still sense danger when they spread out their divine sense. But in this Yuan magnetic steel pith area, Wang Lin's move was enough to take his life. Uao Dragon King and the ancestral crocodile Great Sage swaggered into the pith of the mine. Even with their divine powers, they could no longer determine the exact whereabouts of Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and the others. They only knew that they had disappeared in the direction of the pith of the mine. However, the 2 great demons still maintained a minimum level of caution. Xianmen Tianzong and the others were now famous. Who knew if they had any special techniques up their sleeves? At the very least, Uao Dragon King, who had studied Buddhism with Golden Cicada, knew that Buddhism cultivated the great Tao of karma. By understanding and severing karma, one could deceive the senses of others. Golden Cicada had lived such a carefree life all these years, so carefree that many people and demons did not even know of his existence. Apart from his powerful divine powers, one of the most important reasons was that he cultivated Buddhism to deceive karma. Of course, Buddhism's sudden inspiration concealment of karma was not omnipotent. It depended on the cultivator's own realm, divine powers, dermic powers, and the strength of the opponent's divine powers, as well as the strength of their spiritual senses. At the same time, if the opponent had something to use against them, rather than an illusory clue, the effect of the concealment would naturally be greatly reduced. However, in a situation where they were almost blind, Uao Dragon King and the ancestral crocodile Great Sage could not sense the danger that was so close at hand. It was like 2 blind men without a guide dog, without even a walking stick. No matter how careful they would not be able to detect the traps that had already been laid beneath their feet. They could only wait until they actually stepped on it before they could react. As for whether they could make it in time, that was another question altogether. Chapter 934. Uao Dragon King, who was walking forward, suddenly stopped in his tracks. Something's not right. It's highly possible that they are using the Tao of karma to mask one's spiritual senses. I can vaguely sense some clues. He had been learning from Golden Cicada for a long time. Even though his dermic cultivation was limited, his senses were sharp. Ancestral crocodile sage stopped in his tracks and growled, "You mean to say that the situation has changed from being in the light to being in the dark?" Uao Dragon King said decisively, "Retreat first and wait for them to come out of the mine. It might be a waste of time, but it's much safer. If we don't make it in time for third senior brother, then there's nothing we can do. If we keep going like this, we might not be able to kill them, and we might even get ourselves killed. Oh, it seems like they really do have bad intentions. Then we won't accidentally injure them." Shi Tianhao's voice suddenly sounded. In the next moment, a blinding light erupted from the darkness in front of Uao Dragon King and Ancestral Crocodile Sage. Two gigantic arrays that were almost stacked on top of each other appeared in front of them, distorting the space. That terrifying purple-blue lightning made the two great demon beasts, who had fused their star souls as one, almost unable to open their eyes. Their demon souls felt a faint piercing pain. Along with the sea of lightning that was filled with the intent of destruction, an endless amount of astral winds began to accumulate, almost condensing into a solid form. The astral winds had lost their formless and formless qualities, and had instead become colorful and dazzling. The astral winds and the lightning intertwined with one another, reinforcing each other and growing each other. The resulting explosion of power sent chills down Uao Dragon King and Ancestral Crocodile Sage's spine. Before they could react, the terrifying power of wind and lightning had already erupted, turning into an endless storm of lightning that engulfed the two monsters. In an instant, many thoughts flashed through the minds of Uao Dragon King and Ancestral Crocodile Sage. No matter how powerful the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong are, they are still not as powerful as their master, the master of the Celestial Gate. Such a powerful force is not something that can be achieved in a short period of time. They must have been preparing for an ambush. But even with such a dense magnetic force, they can sense our presence and know that we are approaching them. How did they do it? Not only can they sense our whereabouts, but they also know a way to conceal our spiritual senses. The two great demons were ambushed, so they were naturally bewildered. However, they quickly calmed down, knowing that now was not the time to think about the cause and effect. The key was to deal with the ambush of Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao and the others. Despite the sudden attack, the two monsters reacted quickly. Against the terrifying lightning storm, Uao Dragon King, Ao Dragon, and Ancestral Crocodile Sage, both transformed into their true forms immediately. In the mighty dragon roar and deafening roar, a scaleless dragon with a body like white jade and a huge crocodile covered in rock-like heavy armor appeared in the mineral vein. Uao Dragon King revealed his true form of the white jade dragon, and his body immediately turned illusory. It was as if he had entered the boundless illusory realm and no longer existed in this world. This was the innate ability of the white jade dragon race. With a high cultivation base, Bai Yulong's ability to transform between the illusory and the real was no longer just based on the Tao of spatial transformation. There was also the profound power of the transformation between the illusory and the real. When the body turned illusory, the enemy's attacks, be it spells or physical martial arts, would be unable to harm the body. Therefore, from a certain point of view, the white jade dragon could be said to be the dragon with the strongest defense. If he couldn't neutralize the white jade dragon's innate divine ability, it would be very difficult for him to truly injure it. Uao Dragon King did not dare to let his guard down in the face of Shi Tianhao's terrifying wind and lightning. He channeled all of his energy to the maximum. If there was a slight mistake, the illusory world of nothingness would reveal itself, and there would be great danger under the thunderstorm. On the other side, Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage could only rely on his own defensive power to resist. His thick rock armor had amazing defensive power, but in the face of the terrifying thunderstorm, it seemed to be shaky. The astral winds were like sharp blades that slashed at the surface of his rock armor, causing cracks to appear one after another. Meanwhile, the thunderbolts continued to explode on top of the cracks, blasting the already cracked rock armor into pieces, turning it pitch black. The terrifying power shook Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage's true form, causing his blood to boil and stars to appear before his eyes. As an ancestral crocodile, its physical strength was one of the best among the Dark Sea Dragon clan. Among all the branches of the Dragon clan, only the refined armor Black Dragon and the Yellow Dragon could be compared to it in terms of pure physical strength. At that moment, the thick rock armor on Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage's body lit up with tens of millions of glowing talisman patterns. They worked together to resist Shi Tianhao's endless wind and lightning, but were continuously destroyed by the wind and lightning. His rock armor was even more extraordinary. It was formed by combining the power of the earth and water elements. The power of the earth element was thick and solid, while the power of the water element was constantly circulating to deflect the opponent's attacks. Its defensive power was not inferior to the refining armor Black Dragon's Black Scale Divine ability of the same realm. Under normal circumstances, if he revealed his true form and fought with Shi Tianhao one-on-one, Shi Tianhao would probably have to use the Divine Light of End and the full power of his physical body martial path to activate the stone sword to attack. Only then would he be able to break through his defense. In terms of pure defensive power and physical strength, Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage was not inferior to Fengtian Great Sage, whom Shi Tianhao had fought before. But now, he was facing Shi Tianhao, who had been accumulating power for a long time. He borrowed the power of the two formations and the unlimited wind and thunder technique that surpassed his original limit. In a rush, he was beaten to a sorry state, and the rock armor on his body kept cracking. Piece by piece, the rock armor was annihilated in the wind and lightning, and the originally thick rock armor was shaved off layer by layer. Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage's body was already shining with dazzling starlight, and he had also released the stars he had refined. Demonic power kept strengthening the rock armor, but it could not keep up with the speed of wear and tear. So, the rock armor became thinner and thinner, and Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage's body was about to be revealed. "Damn you, little bastard!" Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage kept roaring, wanting to swallow Shi Tianhao in one bite. But under the impact of the wind and lightning, he could not move forward. He wanted to dodge and retreat, but the thunderstorm had completely swept in all directions, and the entire void was stirred into chaos. If it were not for the special situation of the mineral pith of the magnetic light vein, Shi Tianhao's attack would have completely turned the magnetic steel vein into ruins. Even so, the dark mineral pith area was trembling at this moment, as if it could collapse at any time. The black wall and the ground weren't solid, so there weren't any cracks. However, they were constantly fluctuating like water, like the raging waves on the surface of the sea. The wall and the ground seemed to be collapsing, unable to maintain their original shape. The terrifying power of Shi Tianhao's attack made the huge mineral pith of the magnetic steel vein tremble, and the magnetic force continued to disintegrate, unable to continue. Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage was caught between a rock and a hard place. Seeing this, Ao Dragon King's eyes flashed. His attack can't be endless. It will be difficult to kill the ancestral crocodile, but he might be able to severely injure it. Thinking of this, Ao Dragon King growled, "Ancestral Crocodile!" He rushed to Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage's side and opened his mouth. The Great Sage Ancestral Crocodile reacted quickly. Even though he was extremely frustrated, he still turned his huge body into a cloud of black mist and entered Ao Dragon King's mouth. At last, he managed to avoid Shi Tianhao's infinite wind and thunder technique. Ao Dragon King did not have it easy either. In order to save Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage, he had no choice but to retreat from his illusory state and was immediately baptized by the lightning storm. His defensive power was much weaker than that of the ancestral alligator great sage. He hurriedly escaped into the boundless illusory boundary, and narrowly escaped the calamity. Just as he was about to endure the final stage of the infinite wind and lightning art, he heard Shi Tianhao chuckle, "This is just the beginning. The show has only just begun." As Shi Tianhao shouted, the nine heavens hurricane array suddenly stopped and reverted to a small dot of light, falling back into Li Yuanfang's hands. The original infinite wind and lightning art suddenly lost its balance. The lightning continued to roar, but the raging storm had lost its source. The entire art was on the verge of collapsing. Yuao Dragon King did not think that this was Shi Tianhao's mistake. On the contrary, a strange look flashed across his eyes, and his expression became more serious than ever. The lightning storm, which was originally balanced and constantly supporting each other, suddenly lost one pole. Although it had lost the power to continue growing, at this moment, the lightning erupted with a terrifying might that it had never experienced before. Although it gave the impression that it was running out of energy, the sudden burst of power reached its peak, as if it was about to go into a final frenzy. Shi Tianhao's Yuan Shen turned into the primordial Tai Chi diagram and spun towards Yuao Dragon King. At the center of the Tai Chi diagram, a purple light flashed and shot out, piercing through the lightning storm. Under the guidance of this purple light, all the lightning and thunder converged into a straight bolt of lightning, heading straight for Yuao Dragon King. This bolt of purplish-blue lightning was so condensed that it looked like a solid object, but it kept moving forward. At this moment, the pith zone of the magnetic steel mine finally collapsed with a loud bang, dust flying everywhere. The magnetic energy of the entire mine seemed to have been drawn to this spot, turning into a blinding white magnetic light that spiraled around the purplish-blue lightning. Together with the purplish-blue lightning, it shot towards Yuao Dragon King. Lin Feng's avatar saw this, and his mouth twitched. This thing really isn't an electromagnetic cannon. The magnetic storm engulfed the entire mine, and it was as if the earth was shaking and the mountains were shaking. Countless mines and tunnels collapsed, and sparks flashed everywhere in the void. The array that the Chou Chen clan had set up in the mine was completely destroyed. Chou Chen and the cultivators of the great Zhou dynasty were in so much pain that they wished they were dead. They felt like they were being torn apart by the invisible magnetic storm. After fusing with the magnetic force in the magnetic steel mine, Shi Tianhao's powerful attack vaguely had the terrifying power of the bipolar magnetic chaotic whole divine light released by the grand imperial palace of creation. Chapter 935. Even Xianmen Tianzong's own people had to be careful when dealing with the changes caused by the terrifying lightning that had extracted a vast amount of magnetic energy from the magnetic steel or vein. Wang Lin did not attack the opponent together with Shi Tianhao. Instead, he unleashed his mana to protect Yang Qing, Luo Qingwu and the others. However, his true and false realms' divine arts were also ready to be unleashed, and his target was none other than Yuao Dragon King. The White Jade Dragon King, who was at Yuao Dragon King's level of cultivation, had a deep understanding of the Tao of transformation. In fact, he was extremely resistant to Wang Lin's true and false realm. However, on the other hand, Wang Lin's true and false realm was very effective against the White Jade Dragon tribe's innate divine ability. When the White Jade Dragon tribe was tired of dealing with Shi Tianhao's attacks, Wang Lin's sudden attack could very well tip the balance. However, Shi Tianhao's attack was enough to cast a shadow over Yuao Dragon King's heart. The magnetite thunderbolt looked like it was moving slowly, but in reality, it was extremely fast. It was much faster than sword rays, treasure rays, and spells. Even a powerful demon like Yuao Dragon King could not avoid it in time. He could only use his race's natural abilities to the fullest in hopes of avoiding it. Although he had left the Mystic Sea to learn from Golden Cicada and had returned to the dragon race's ancestral land in recent years, he was still the strongest person in the primordial Sky Dragon race, even though he had already relinquished his position as the White Jade Dragon race's patriarch. Now, if he wanted to find a White Jade Dragon that was stronger than him, he was afraid that the only person who could transform into a White Jade Dragon was his eldest senior brother monkey. However, this magnetic lightning was far too terrifying. Wherever it passed, space collapsed and turned into primal chaos. Both the real and the illusory worlds were forcefully reversed. Even though Uao Dragon King was already at the level of one with the astral soul, his body was still constantly shifting between being real and illusory. It was not easy for him to turn into an illusion, but he was dragged out of the boundless illusory world by a terrifying and mysterious force. He turned back into reality and faced the terrifying power of the lightning. Of course, Uao Dragon King wasn't willing to give up just like that, so he immediately reverted back to his incorporeal form. Then, he was dragged out and struggled again. In just an instant, he had gone back and forth countless times. Every time he materialized, his body would be burned by the lightning. As his injuries worsened, it became more and more difficult for Uao Dragon King to use his abilities. He could clearly sense that Shi Tianhao's attack contained powerful Dao annihilation energy, and it was disintegrating his divine ability. Just like Xiao Yan's celestial flaming lotus, Shi Tianhao had made use of the right time and the right place to launch this powerful attack. Even if all the external conditions were met, he would not be able to do it again for a long time. The power of the Tao of Annihilation was even stronger than Wang Lin's supreme annihilation. He had paid a huge price in exchange for this extraordinarily violent power. Uao Dragon King's heart was filled with despair. After struggling for thousands of times, his innate mystique would be nullified. When that happens, even the ancestral alligator great sage or the black dragon of the same realm might not be able to survive. Ancestral crocodile sage, who was temporarily swallowed by Uao Dragon King, was also shocked. He thought he was going to escape, but now he had nowhere else to run. Shi Tianhao's attack would turn him and Uao Dragon King into a skewer of candied fruit. But at that very moment, the space around the battlefield began to warp and distort due to the destructive power of the lightning bolt and Uao Dragon King's illusory and corporeal world transformation. The void that had been destroyed and turned into a barren wasteland suddenly lit up with white light. It seemed to be the power of a realm. The power of the realm was at the point where Uao Dragon King and the lightning met. Uao Dragon King was surprised. Under the pressure of the lightning, he had no time to pay attention to anything else and was swallowed by the realm passageway that suddenly appeared. And the lightning swept all the way, turning the domain passage, which was originally only a dot, into an extremely wide flat crack, as though a hole had been opened in the void. Then, the lightning twisted and straightened again. It shot toward the mineral vein above, destroying everything in its path. It pierced through the mineral vein and broke through to the infinite wasteland before finally disappearing from the world. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao did not have the time to feel sorry for what had happened. They shifted their attention to the realm passageway in front of them and silently sensed the mysteries within. The mineral pith zone had been destroyed and a large amount of dust floated in the air. There was still a large amount of magnetic energy that interfered with their divine sense, but at least they were no longer in the dark. So that's how it is. This is a foreign dimension, and it's in contact with the marrow area of the origin magnetic steel vein. A large amount of the marrow's spiritual power has been drawn into this foreign dimension. No wonder the marrow showed signs of strong but weak signs of decline. Shi Tianhao said in realization, the foreign dimension and the mineral pith zone had reached a balance. But now that I have destroyed the mineral pith zone, the flow of spiritual energy inside has begun to become chaotic. I wonder what is hidden inside and how the change in the flow of spiritual energy will affect it? Wang Lin said, "Let's go in first. The two monsters just now have also entered." Shi Tianhao nodded and entered the realm passageway with Wang Lin into the foreign dimension. While the kings of hell were fighting, the little devils in the mineral vein above were suffering. Both the Chou-Chen clan and the great Zhou dynasty's camp suffered heavy losses. Liang Fu, the lord of Yanliang, and Li Yao, the cloud-riding immortal, who was at the nascent divinity incarnation stage, were in better condition. After all, they were only affected by the aftershock, and the thunderbolt that pierced through the mine did not pass through them. But the two primordial spirit adepts were also in a sorry state. Cloud-riding immortal looked down with lingering fear. Who was it that struck just now? Liang Fu's face was dark. The magnetic energy is too strong. I cannot sense the aura of the magical power contained within, so I cannot be sure. But there is definitely no one in the Chou-Chen clan in this mineral vein who has such power. I don't know who the person who fought with Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao was. But if their opponent did not cultivate enlightening or magnetic magical powers, then it can only be Shi Tianhao of Xianmen Tianzong. Cloud-riding immortal heard this and fell silent. Although he did not say much, he was actually grateful to Liang Fu for stopping him from tailing Shi Tianhao and the others. He was also glad that he was not completely muddle-headed and did not stubbornly chase after them. The Chou-Chen clan in this mineral vein has also been beaten senseless. The formation has also been broken. They can no longer stop us from mining magnetic steel. After a moment of silence, Cloud-Riding Immortal said, "But let's not go too deep. Let's just dig some ores here. Dig as much as we can and then leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, something unexpected might happen." Liang Fu nodded solemnly. He and Cloud-Riding Immortal were originally in charge of dealing with Chou-Chen and the other intruders. However, the other intruders were ridiculously strong, and they could not clear the area or resist them at all. In order to save time, the two Essence Soul Big Shots could only work together as miners. After all, their efficiency was much higher than that of their subordinate. Looking at the damaged mineral vein, Liang Fu and Cloud-Riding Immortal looked at each other and sighed. Shi Tianhao was very satisfied with the power of his attack. But his original intention was to greet Yuao Dragon King and Ancestral Crocodile Sage, not to clear out the magnetic steel mine. Therefore, although he was satisfied with the power of his mystic art, Shi Tianhao was still a little resentful. After all, he did not achieve his goal. Once they entered the foreign dimension, Shi Tianhao looked around with an unfriendly gaze. Unfortunately, the dimensional passage he tore open caused the dimension to become chaotic. Yuao Dragon King and Ancestral Crocodile Sage did not seem to be here. TSK, what a disappointment. Shi Tianhao shook his head. But he quickly pushed the matter to the back of his mind, and began to look around the foreign dimension with great interest. This was a very vast foreign dimension, but it was very run-down and desolate. As far as the eye could see, most of the place was barren land and sand dunes. There was no sign of life. The cold wind howled, stirring up a sandstorm that blurred the world. But in the eyes of Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao, the environment here was much more comfortable than when they were in the mineral vein. After entering this place, the magnetic force was still abundant, but it was no longer scattered all over the place. On the contrary, the magnetic force seemed to have formed a stable channel that extended in all directions in this foreign dimension. These magnetic forces converged into rope-like existences, extending out in the void in an orderly manner. Some of the more concentrated magnetic forces had even formed a tangible magnetic light. In such an environment, Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao and the others could freely spread out their divine senses. A small amount of magnetic force still interfered with them, but it did not affect them much. The two looked at each other. These magnetic lights seemed to be converging in one direction? Silently, Wang Lin said, "That seems to be our target." The two were bold and skilled. They followed the magnetic lights and moved forward in the foreign dimension. Of course, there was no need to mention other possible dangers. Knowing that Ao Dragon King and Ancestral Crocodile Sage were also in this world, Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao were on high alert. They had just ambushed them. If they were to be ambushed again, it would be a joke. At the same time, Chu Yang, Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang, Luo Qingwu, Tunton and the others were still under Wang Lin's control. After all, when facing opponents like Ao Dragon King and Ancestral Crocodile Great Sage, Yang Qing and the others' cultivation bases were still relatively low. If they were ambushed, there was no chance of survival, let alone the younger disciples. But what Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao saw and heard was still visible to Chu Yang, Yang Qing, and Luo Qingwu through Wang Lin's projection. As they walked, Wang Lin suddenly frowned and landed on the desolate ground. Shi Tianhao came to his side and saw that Wang Lin was looking at a desolate land. Unlike the yellow sand around them, the sand here was black. After sensing this piece of black sand, Shi Tianhao felt that there was a faint trace of mana left in it, which made him feel slightly familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. Shi Tianhao turned to look at Wang Lin. Third Senior Brother. Chapter 936. Wang Lin's eyes stared at this desolate land that was completely different from the surroundings. This desolate land was actually not small, at least 1,000 miles in circumference. In fact, there were remnants of the same mana aura around the desert, but it had gradually dissipated over time. The desert in front of him must have been much larger than it was now, but it kept shrinking. If there were no external factors, with the passage of time, the desert would eventually disappear completely. However, feeling the ancient desolation of this foreign space, the desert had probably existed for more than 10,000 years, or even longer. It was quite rare for it to still have an area of thousands of miles. Of course, what Wang Lin cared about was not the cultivation of the person who left this mark. If he wanted to, he could be stronger than this. What Wang Lin cared about was the other party's background. Wang Lin was very familiar with the remnant magic power aura on the black desolate beach. Avicii demonic chi. Wang Lin said calmly. Shi Tianhao came to a sudden realization. No wonder he also felt a slight sense of familiarity, but he could not recall the specific origin. This sense of familiarity came from Wang Lin, who was beside him. Since the immemorial age, the human cultivation world had been divided into the righteous and the demonic. In the Middle Age, the confrontation between the righteous and the demonic reached its peak. Other than the war with the demon race, the main theme of the divine land was the battle between the righteous and the demonic. It was not until the final battle between the righteous and the demonic that the demonic path completely declined, and the Middle Age came to an end. In the Middle Age, the righteous and demonic paths were mixed in the human cultivation world. There were many demonic sects that shocked an era. Among them, the most powerful demonic Holy Land was the primordial demon cult. They controlled the demonic path and dominated the entire Tianyuan world. The leader of the primordial demon cult, Jiang Zhaoyang, was known as the primordial demon lord. When the primordial demon cult and himself reached the peak, he was recognized as the strongest human in the divine land. The supreme Tao secret of the primordial demon cult was called the primordial demon scripture. One of the orthodoxies was called the Avicii scripture. When a cultivator succeeded in cultivating the Avicii scripture, they could cultivate the Avicii demonic chi and use it to cultivate the Avicii immortal body. Although it was not truly immortal, the refined body would be impermanent. There was no fear of injury, and the body would be indestructible. Years ago, when Wang Lin entered the void battlefield for the first time, he fought fiercely with the cultivators of the Underworld Hall who massacred his hometown. At that time, Wang Lin, who was only in the middle stage of Gold Core Realm, fought with an opponent in the late stage of nascent soul realm, and both sides suffered heavy losses. His body was completely destroyed, and his remnant soul could only reside in the underworld Pearl. Thanks to the fortuitous encounter with the primordial demon Sex Avicii scripture, he was able to reconstruct his body. However, when Wang Lin used the Avicii immortal body to reconstruct his corporeal body, he did not use the Avicii devil chi. Instead, he used the Yellow Springs true water to cleanse his soul and reconstruct his body. After Wang Lin combined his own understanding of the Tao, the Avicii immortal body had evolved into a powerful divine art that originated from Wang Lin himself. It was called the Yellow Springs immortal body. Not only did he have the advantage of the Avicii immortal body, which allowed him to gather and disperse at will, but he also had the Yellow Spring true water to forge his body. When the enemy attacked him at close range, he could turn his flesh and blood into the Yellow Spring true water to counterattack. The existence of this technique had greatly compensated for the shortcomings of Wang Lin's physical body. However, after Wang Lin proved his essence soul and refined his physical body into his essence soul, he no longer used this technique. However, Wang Lin did not abandon it and was still studying it carefully. In the past, the primordial demon Sex disciples who cultivated the Avicii immortal body were very strong cultivators below the essence soul stage. They relied on their physical body to not be afraid of getting hurt. Most of the time, as long as their soul, yuanying or golden elixir were not hurt, they dared to fight with others by exchanging injuries for injuries. They were especially ferocious because of this divine art. After proving his essence soul, the Avicii immortal body of the primordial demon Sex disciples was not directly eliminated. The cultivator could choose to refine it into other divine art. Generally, there were two paths. One was to refine the Avicii demon statue, which was similar to an incarnation. The other was to transform it into another divine art, the Gate of Avicii. As for how to choose, it was up to the cultivator. Wang Lin did not have the Avicii demon statue or the Gate of Avicii on hand, but he did not think of following the primordial demon Sex path. Just like how he transformed the Avicii immortal body into the netherworld immortal body, Wang Lin had his own ideas on how to improve this Tao technique. At this moment, he already had some clues, but he still needed to think about it. Of course, more contact with the profound orthodoxy and dermic arts of the primordial demon sect could be a reference and stimulate inspiration, which would help Wang Lin perfect his divine arts and dermic arts faster. A trace left behind by an elder of the primordial demon sect who proved his essence soul. Wang Lin observed for a moment and said, "It should not be Tao integration, but it is stronger than the essence soul incarnation. It is most likely at the void reversion stage. This trace has been here for a long time. It should be during the Middle Era, when the primordial demon sect was still far from being destroyed." After listening to Wang Lin's analysis, Shi Tianhao nodded. In other words, just like those essence soul powerhouses who died in the Ying Ocean, he entered Tianhuang mainland by himself and got trapped here by chance. I wonder if he is still alive? Wang Lin raised his head and looked ahead, where the magnetic lights gathered. We might be able to find the answer there. The two of them continued flying forward. Halfway through, Shi Tianhao smiled and said, "It is too difficult to find the orthodoxy of the primordial demon sect now. According to Su Anda, there are very few remnants of the Fiend Tao in the Underworld Hall who are familiar with the primordial demon sect's Tao technique. Their cultivation techniques are also very low-end, so it is extremely difficult to improve further. Due to the uniqueness of their orthodoxy and standpoint, the Underworld Hall recruited a large number of powerhouses to join them. Naturally, the majority of them were Fiend Tao cultivators. After the large Fiend Tao sects that were active in the past were destroyed, the remnants of their orthodoxy were like stray dogs and lived in fear. In order to avoid being surrounded and hunted down, most of them joined the Underworld Hall. For example, the former King Qingguang who practiced the orthodoxy of the Blood River sect, Sikong Yu, the former elder of the 10,000 Ghost sect, and King Taishan, who was killed by Shi Tianhao and came from the White Bone Path, were all like that. Apart from them, there was also the Night Demon sect, the Joyful Clan, the Shadow Demon sect, and the Netherworld Demon sect, which was also from the King of the Underworld. Wang Lin said, in the battle between the righteous Dao and the Fiend Dao in the past, the primordial demon sect was the leader of the Fiend Dao. Naturally, it was the enemy's main target. As the two of them continued forward, their hearts suddenly stirred. They felt that there seemed to be a faint wave of divine sense spreading in all directions at the place where the magnetic lights gathered. It was extremely powerful. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao looked at each other and restrained their auras. Although the wave of divine sense was strong, it was too far away and could not capture traces of Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao. It's not the two great demons just now. Shi Tianhao thought carefully and said, judging by the wave of demonic power in the divine sense, it's also a demon. Compared to those two, it can only be stronger, not weaker. He should have entered long before we arrived. I just don't know if there is anyone else besides him. After the wave of divine sense did not find anything unusual, it retracted. However, there was a faint sense of doubt in the wave of divine sense. Just as the two of them were about to set off, Shi Tianhao's expression suddenly changed slightly. He opened his palm and an item appeared in his palm, giving off a faint glow. It was a small bell hammer. It was light gold in color and its surface was engraved with mysterious patterns. This was a treasure that Lin Feng had given to Shi Tianhao in his early years. It was called the Ecliptic Bell Hammer. It was not a magic treasure in itself, but an accessory of the magic treasure Ecliptic Bell. In the past, Shi Tianhao was used to using this treasure in conjunction with the Yuanying magic treasure, the Bronze Void Cauldron. Later, as Shi Tianhao's own cultivation gradually increased, the Bronze Void Cauldron was also taken away by Lin Feng to plant flowers and trees. This Ecliptic Bell Hammer, Shi Tianhao no longer used it. He just kept it with him. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt the Ecliptic Bell Hammer move. Although it was very weak, there was a faint feeling of joy coming from it. It was as if a wanderer had returned home and the leaves had fallen to their roots. Shi Tianhao raised his eyebrows slightly. Could it be that the magic treasure Ecliptic Bell is in this foreign space? Although he did not know what grade of magic treasure Ecliptic Bell was and what it was used for, and he already had a lot of treasures with him now, one could never have too many magic treasures. Many magic treasures had special uses and could not be measured by grade or magic power. Moreover, Shi Tianhao yearned for the way his master, Lin Feng, had praised him and the others in the past. He wanted to imitate it, so naturally, he hoped that his family would be as rich as possible. Wang Lin glanced at the Ecliptic Bell Hammer and understood. He nodded. Master definitely did not ask us to come here for no reason. I just don't know if there are other things besides the Ecliptic Bell. Great Demon, Avicii Devil Chi, Ecliptic Bell. There are really many things here. Shi Tianhao put away the Ecliptic Bell Hammer. Let's go. They continued forward. After flying for a while, the two of them exclaimed softly at the same time. Their gazes fell on the desert dunes in the distance. This time, it was not the desert that had been infected by the Avicii Devil Chi. Instead, there were caves in the desert. These caves were not big, with a diameter of about a meter or so. However, there were so many of them that it made one's hair stand. They were densely packed, and there were tens of thousands of them. The two of them scanned with their divine senses and immediately discovered that the depths of these caves, under the desert, was actually hollow. There was another world inside. It was so vast that it was like an underground palace. The area of the underground palace was many times larger than the thousands of caves on the surface. It extended in all directions, and the underground palace was completely hollow. The two of them extended their divine senses all the way and discovered that there was a huge tunnel in the distance that led from the underground palace to the surface. Looking at these caves, it seems like the survivors in the underground palace were suddenly stimulated by something. They didn't go through the main entrance but rushed out from the top of the sand layer impatiently. Shi Tianhao scanned the underground palace with his divine sense and found that the underground palace was empty at the moment. There were no signs of life. Suddenly, his heart stirred. Third senior brother, do you think this underground palace looks like? Chapter 937. Shi Tianhao did not finish his sentence, but Wang Lin understood what he meant because Wang Lin had the same guess. An ant's nest, said Wang Lin slowly. This underground palace is like a giant ant's nest. There were countless holes. There were many traces left at the edge of the hole, and it could be seen that it was some kind of insect that broke out of the sand. However, the insect was a little too big. It was undoubtedly not an ordinary ant, but some kind of demon. Just as Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao were pondering, their hearts moved at the same time. They saw the void in the distant sky suddenly break open, and hundreds of black shadows surged out. They were completely black and were as big as wolves, but they were giant black ants. Their bodies flashed with a cold, metallic black light, and they looked ferocious and terrifying. This layer of cold shell armor covered their bodies' masculine chi blood. However, Shi Tianhao frowned slightly. He could clearly feel the majestic physical strength under the black shell armor, which far exceeded most demons of the same realm. He had been in and out of Tianhuang continent for the past few years. Among the many demons that he had personally interacted with, the Mang turtle race and the black armored dragon race, which were the mixed-blood black tortoise branch like the Tibetan tortoise and the mysterious underworld race, were already the most outstanding in terms of physical chi blood power. The ancestral crocodile, which he had just met, was already considered the most outstanding. Apart from those demons that he had personally interacted with, Shi Tianhao had refined the Kunpeng's essence blood, so he knew that the Kunpeng's physical strength was stronger than those demons. Also, when he had witnessed his master, Lin Feng, fighting with the monkey had transformed into the supreme spiritual divine monkey and used the grand spiritual king hand, which was also impressive. The great sage did not attack, but he could feel the terrifying physical strength of the heaven-reaching demon apes just by standing there. However, although the highest level of the black ants was only at the demon king realm, the tremendous power contained under their cold shell armor made Shi Tianhao raise his brows slightly. That was the physical strength of the Mang turtle, the black armored dragon, and the ancestral crocodile at the same cultivation level. Even the heaven-reaching demon apes and the Kunpeng in their Kun form might not be able to defeat them. These black ants were only at the demon commander realm. Just based on the power of their physical chi blood, they were superior to many demon kings of the demon race. Third senior brother, these things are probably heaven-carrying ants. Shi Tianhao looked at the ants with interest. He turned to Wang Lin and said, "This demon is already extinct in other places. I didn't expect to see it here." There were many types of demons. Many races had already disappeared in the long river of time, but there were many powerful demons that had left their mark in the heaven. The heaven-carrying ants were a classic example. As the name suggested, they were demonic ants that could carry the fortune of the heavens. The demons all had their own innate abilities. In terms of physical strength alone, the heaven-carrying ants were definitely a race that could not be ignored. Throughout history, only the primordial celestial dragons, the primordial divine elephants, and the pure-blooded black tortoises could match them. There were even rumors that the heaven-carrying ants were superior to the other three races in terms of physical strength alone. Apart from them, the Kunpeng in their Kun form and the heaven-reaching demon apes of the primordial demon apes could also be compared to the other four races, but they were slightly weaker. However, the heaven-carrying ants, the primordial divine elephants, and the pure-blooded black tortoises were no longer seen. Generally speaking, it was assumed that the three races were extinct. The pure-blooded black tortoises had already gone extinct in the primordial epoch, and the primordial divine elephants had a similarly sparse population, becoming extinct in the primordial epoch. In the end, even the heaven-carrying ants gradually disappeared in the middle epoch. Xianmen Tianzong and the others had never thought that they would see the demons that belonged to the legends of history in the alternate dimension under the magnetite or vein. Wang Lin stared at the ant colony and slowly nodded. So these are the heaven-carrying ants, but they look a little strange. The black ants had ferocious looks in their eyes. They shook their heads and constantly scanned the surroundings. The heaven-carrying ants that appeared here were only demon kings and demon marshals. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao had concealed their tracks, so they could not discover them at all. However, Wang Lin could clearly feel that from the heaven-carrying ants, there were waves of extremely strong divine sense. It was the divine sense that only great saint demons could have. Moreover, it was not an ordinary great saint demon. It was most likely a great demon at the level of astral soul fusion. The two brothers looked at each other. This aura of divine sense. Is it the great demon who probed with his divine sense just now? Thinking of this, how could the two not understand that the heaven-carrying ants in front of them were actually puppets? They had empty bodies, but the great demon had erased their spirits, refined their demon nascent souls and demon cores, and made them into his doppelgangers. This guy is probably doing something. His main body can't leave, and he's suspicious, so he let these heaven-carrying ants come here to investigate. Shi Tianhao curled his lips. The yellow heaven bell may also be nearby. My bell hammer here has moved, so it's impossible for the yellow heaven bell to not have any reaction. This just confirms his suspicions. Wang Lin's eyes flashed. These heaven-carrying ants are also stained with a Vichy demon chi. Humph, it seems that everything is really gathered together. He looked up at the direction where the many magnetic lights converged. It's there. At such a close distance, this great demon's cultivation isn't weak. We can't avoid his divine sense. As he said this, Wang Lin directly spread out his figure and walked toward the heaven-carrying ants with a calm expression. In that case, let's go directly. Shi Tianhao smiled. Third senior brother, don't kill these ants. Although only their shells are left and refined into doppelgangers, they are still good things. He also spread out his figure and went to meet the heaven-carrying ant. Although the heaven-carrying ants were strong, the strongest was only at the Demon King realm. If Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao really wanted to attack, how could they stop them? These heaven-carrying ants looked coldly at Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao coming over. Suddenly, their demon chi trembled and reached fusion. Hundreds of ants suddenly gathered and turned into a huge figure. It stood up and attacked Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao. This was one of the heaven-carrying ants' innate divine abilities. It was similar to the Tao soldier formation system. When the power of many giant ants gathered together, it would cause a qualitative change from quantitative change, erupting with power that surpassed the limit and turned the world upside down. Since ancient times, there were human cultivators who subdued demons and turned them into Tao soldiers. In the eyes of human cultivators, the heaven-carrying ants were the most suitable demons to be refined into Tao soldiers. Each individual was very powerful. With such a race's innate divine ability, they could achieve twice the result with half the effort. The ancient heavenly gate once tried to tame and subdue the heaven-carrying ants to be refined into their own Tao soldiers. Unfortunately, they were obstructed by other aspects. The heaven-carrying ants themselves weren't easy to deal with, so they failed in the end. However, it was also during that period that the heaven-carrying ants started to decline. A large number of experts died. These heaven-carrying ants were all clones refined by the same big demon. Now that they gathered, It was as if another stronger clone of that big demon had descended. However, it still couldn't block the edge of Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao. Wang Lin looked at the huge black figure in front of him and didn't stop. Yellow Spring's true water surged around him and turned into the river of forgetfulness, sweeping towards the black figure. Although this black figure was completely formed by heaven-carrying ants and was completely black, one could roughly see its shape. It had a tiger's head and ape's body. Light flowed in its eyes like the sun and moon. On its forehead, there wasn't a king character. Instead, there was a circular pattern like a small mirror. Facing Wang Lin's river of forgetfulness, the circular pattern on the black figure's forehead suddenly lit up. Like a real mirror, it reflected the appearance of the river of forgetfulness. The next moment, the surging Yellow Spring's true water actually gushed out of this circle and turned into the appearance of the river of forgetfulness. It faced Wang Lin's divine ability. Wang Lin's eyes moved slightly, but his expression didn't change at all. The river of forgetfulness suddenly expanded, and its scale was much larger than before. The other party's river of forgetfulness swayed a little, and its scale also increased. However, after a certain extent, it reached its limit. However, at this moment, his river of forgetfulness compared to Wang Lin's river of forgetfulness was like the difference between a mountain stream and the Yangtze River. The silent river of forgetfulness swallowed the Yellow Spring's true water, which was of the same origin. Then, it sank the black figure to the bottom of the river. Humph, good move. The great demon's last consciousness thought was transmitted, and then it was purified by the Yellow Spring's true water. The carrying heaven ants that were originally gathered together also scattered. Although they still had tremendous power and their shells were still flashing with a cold luster, the light in their eyes had completely disappeared. All the carrying heaven ants were like clay puppets and wooden carvings at this moment. Wang Lin retracted the river of forgetfulness and kept all the carrying heaven ants. He and Shi Tianhao looked at each other. So it's that Lu Yuan. In the past, the 10 most active great demons in Tianhuang mainland were used to being called the 10 sages of the demon race. Most of them had their own clans, but only great sage Lu Yuan was a Dao Lu Yuan, and he always acted alone. This demon was wild and difficult to tame, and at the same time, he was very aggressive. He loved to challenge other great demons, and he sought to improve in battle. He had a bad reputation in Tianhuang mainland, but he was indeed very strong. However, he disappeared a few years ago and had not appeared for a long time. Lu Yuan had the head of a tiger and the body of an ape, and his eyes were as bright as the sun and moon. He stood on 1,000 mountains, and there was a circular pattern on his forehead. His innate divine power could reflect the opponent's divine powers and dharma spells like a mirror, and he was rather difficult to deal with. Although it was just a clone just now, Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao had already recognized him after a short exchange. Let's go. Although they knew the foundation of great sage Lu Yuan, Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao were not affected at all. They did not stop, and instead rushed toward the place where the magnetic light converged. Soon, a tall mountain appeared in Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao's vision. It was a mountain peak that was completely black. Golden and black light flickered faintly at the top of the mountain. Around the mountain peak, there were chains that bound the mountain peak. However, it was not to suppress the mountain peak, but to forcibly uproot the mountain peak from the ground. The mountain was firmly fixed on the ground, and the two sides were in a stalemate. If one looked carefully, the numerous chains were shockingly formed from countless heaven-bearing ants that were connected from head to tail. Chapter 938. This jet-black mountain peak, which flickered with alternating golden and black light, was the place where the magnetic light gathered in this foreign dimension. At this moment, the scene in front of Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao was quite strange. Countless carrying heaven ants were connected head to tail, turning into thousands of chains that wrapped around the mountain peak. From their movements, it seemed like they were trying to uproot the mountain peak from the ground. These carrying heaven ants had different cultivation levels. Some were demon kings, some were demon commanders, and the lower ones were demon generals. There were even more ants with little demon chi. However, at this moment they were connected as one. Under the effect of their innate abilities, their power was very strong, even exceeding the limits of their cultivation level. They were even stronger than many great demons that had achieved immortal demon souls. Even a demon king heaven ant was only the size of a tiger or wolf. Compared to the huge bodies of other demons, it was very small. However, its power was that of a demon king, and its physical strength was stronger than other demons of the same level. However, under such circumstances, the entangled pitch-black mountain peak was still firmly fixed in place, in a stalemate with the chains formed by the carrying heaven ants. Wang Lin scanned with his divine sense and understood. So that's how it is. The pitch-black mountain peak is formed by the Avicii demon statue, refined by a powerful cultivator of the primordial demon cult. The bottom of the mountain isn't firmly connected to this foreign space. Instead, it's suppressing something. Wang Lin's eyes flashed. It's a great sage carrying heaven ant that has achieved immortal demon soul. Shi Tianhao nodded. That carrying heaven ant with immortal demon soul must be the queen of this group of carrying heaven ants. The carrying heaven ants were a matriarchal clan, and the leader was always the queen of the clan. The two of them shouted, and their eyes flashed. In their vision, the pitch-black mountain peak gradually turned into a black mist. Through the black mist, they could see a carrying heaven ant lying quietly in the deepest part of it. Generally speaking, the queen of the ant clan would be much larger than ordinary ants. With a huge, swollen abdomen, it was difficult to even move. This carrying heaven queen ant looked just like that. Her front half was black, and her back abdomen was white. It was extremely huge. However, unlike ordinary ant queens that had difficulty moving, the holding heaven queen ant was slightly bloated, but judging from its appearance, it could still move freely. However, its overall size was much smaller than an ordinary heaven-carrying ant. It was so small that it was a little exaggerated. Its length was not even as long as a normal person's palm. However, the strong sense of power contained in this body still let Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao clearly know that this was a great demon whose physical strength was far superior to other demon race great sages of the same realm. Unfortunately, they're all dead. Shi Tianhao curled his lips. With his and Wang Lin's eyesight, they could see that whether it was the numerous carrying heaven ants that had turned into chains or the carrying heaven ant queen that had fallen from the jet black mountain, they were all dead, leaving behind only their powerful bodies. And Wang Lin, who had a certain understanding of the primordial demon sect's ancient books, also quickly saw that the Avicii demon statue that had turned into a jet black mountain was already ownerless. It was not only the Avicii demon statue that made up this jet-black mountain, but also the cultivator's void return physique. The two gradually melted together, forming such a jet-black mountain, but the divine sense and thoughts had all dissipated, and there was no breath of life. Seeing this, how could Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao not understand that this primordial demon sect cultivator and these carrying heaven ants were actually mutually wounded, and they almost perished together? Most likely, this demonic cultivator wanted to subdue and refine the carrying heaven ants here, but he was resisted by the carrying heaven ant. Both sides fell into a stalemate, and in the end both of them were exhausted. However, after all, both sides had extraordinary foundations. Even if their divine sense had dissipated, they still formed a stable balance of power, and the stalemate had lasted until now. And looking at the black mountain lingering on the jet-black mountain, the Avicii demonic chi was still constantly invading the carrying heaven ant chains that bound him and the carrying heaven ant queen that was suppressed at the foot of the mountain. It could be seen that although both sides perished together, there was still a slight difference in strength between the two sides. If this continued, and the jet-black mountain did not dissipate, and the void return physique did not completely collapse, the Avicii demonic chi would one day refine all the carrying heaven ants, and then this primordial demon sect cultivator had hope of using the void return method to rebirth. Although it was only a certain hope, there was no doubt that this was the follow-up method left by that demonic cultivator. Judging from the current situation, if there was no external intervention, then this war between humans and ants would most likely be won by humans. If he succeeded in rebirth, he could immediately harvest a large number of carrying heaven ant avatars. Although except for the queen, the other carrying heaven ants had not yet achieved the immortal demon soul, they all had very high potential. If they improved their cultivation base in the future, they would be an extremely terrifying force. Under the situation where the many carrying heaven ant avatars worked together, it was possible that their strength would surpass his main bodies. Even now, with so many carrying heaven ants working together, they would be able to contend with his main body. However, this was destined to be an ideal situation, and it was also a last resort. Presumably, even if that demonic cultivator had a better method, he would not be willing to do this. Moreover, his expectations were destined to not be realized. Not to mention that Xianmen Tianzong and the others had arrived. Just looking at the hundreds of carrying heaven ants that had been refined by great sage Lu Yuan just now, it was clear what the situation here was. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao both wore calm expressions as they looked up at the jet-black mountain. Between the golden and black light, there stood a tall figure. The figure had the head of a tiger and the body of an ape, and his complexion was as beautiful as the sun and moon. It was great sage Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan, the great sage, was also staring at them with a burning gaze. The circular pattern on his forehead trembled slightly like water ripples. His two nostrils panted heavily, forming two long white lines that stayed in the void for a long time without dispersing. Eventually, they turned into clouds and mist. Beside great sage Lu Yuan, on the top of the mountain, there was a small ancient bell that seemed to be cast from gold. It had a simple and unadorned appearance, and its surface was engraved with mysterious patterns that exuded a vigorous power. Its artistic conception and aura were exactly the same as the yellow heaven bell hammer. Shi Tianhao glanced at the small ancient bell. This is the yellow heaven bell? I'm afraid it's not something that the primordial demon cultivator possessed. Otherwise, he could have directly subdued these carrying heaven ant. I don't know why this treasure also fell into this foreign space. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao faced off against great sage Lu Yuan. Both sides were constantly scanning each other with their divine senses. Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao's expressions changed slightly. So that's how it is. Great sage Lu Yuan, who was at the realm of Star Soul as one, could even win against the combined forces of the carrying heaven ants and the jet-black mountain. However, this great demon clearly didn't want to destroy the rare opportunity under his feet. Instead, he wanted to subdue and refine it. This wasn't a simple matter. Not only did the jet-black mountain and the carrying heaven ants reach a miraculous balance of power, there was also the yellow heaven bell and a large amount of magnetic force gathered here. This made the situation even more delicate. Great sage Lu Yuan was a belligerent, but he suppressed his violent temper and carefully tried to refine the mountain and the carrying heaven ants together. This great demon's eyesight was also very sharp. If he could refine and absorb the yellow heaven bell, the jet-black mountain, the carrying heaven ants, and the magnetic force gathered here together, then even he, who was at the realm of Star Soul as one, would benefit greatly. His strength would have a qualitative change. After refining a powerful clone, its strength might even be no weaker than his main body. If he could completely refine and absorb it, then it couldn't be better. He was confident that after refining a few more stars, he would immediately go through the first tribulation. With such a bright future in front of him, It was no wonder that great sage Lu Yuan was willing to slowly polish here. In fact, great sage Lu Yuan was at the realm of Star Soul as one after all. After a long time of hard work, he was only half a step away from success. A portion of the carrying heaven ants had been refined by him into a clone. This was proof. It was like splitting a mountain and splitting a rock. The rock finally loosened and many fragments fell. Although these heaven-holding ants were separated from the whole body and refined by great sage Lu Yuan first, when great sage Lu Yuan completely refined all of them in the future, he could still trace the source and wouldn't be affected at all. After a long time of refining, everything in front of him was like an unripe fruit that had finally ripened. Because of this, great sage Lu Yuan's mood was terrible when he saw Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao appear. Two brats at the primordial spirit transformation realm? The other one, hurry up and scram. Otherwise, I will also eat you. He stared at Wang Lin. As for you, you dare to destroy my clone. Don't even think of leaving this place alive. Great sage Lu Yuan had been suppressing his manic emotions. Now, he instantly erupted. Standing on the mountain peak, he didn't say anything. He opened his bloody mouth and shot a beam of white light towards Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao. The white light was like a waterfall, transcending the barriers of the void. The moment it was shot out, it arrived in front of Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao at the same time. The surrounding magnetic lights shook slightly. Many of them were guided by the waterfall and also shot towards their target. Ha! A brilliant smile appeared on Shi Tianhao's extremely handsome face. His lips were red, and his white teeth even shone faintly. He didn't take great sage Lu Yuan's attack head-on. Instead, he suddenly extended his body and shook his arms. The image of the Kuan Ping appeared, and he transformed into a green rock that covered the sky. He flapped his wings and soared high into the sky. Then, he swooped down towards great sage Lu Yuan. Wang Lin's expression was indifferent. A demonic gate opened above his head. He used the true and false world's mystique and dodged great sage Lu Yuan's attack. Huh! Great sage Lu Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly. The contempt in his eyes immediately lessened. Previously, when Wang Lin destroyed his heaven-bearing ant clone, he hadn't displayed his full strength. Thus, great sage Lu Yuan was only angry that he had been offended. He didn't think that Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao had the ability to threaten him. But now that he saw the scene in front of him, great sage Lu Yuan took note. Although they are only at the primordial spirit incarnation realm, the mystique and dermic powers of these two brats are quite good. Where did these two people come from in the human race? Previously, he had stayed in this foreign dimension for a long time. Not to mention the divine land, he didn't even know the current situation in infinite wilderness. Could they be people that Taishu Temple secretly nurtured? Great sage Lu Yuan's gaze turned increasingly cold and sinister. But they don't look like it from the mystique and dermic formulations. It wasn't that he couldn't stop refining the chains on the mountain peak. It was just that temporarily stopping it would delay the successful refinement. Thus, great sage Lu Yuan couldn't figure it out. He simply stopped thinking about it. With a long roar, he directly pounced towards Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.